Michael Thompson, and I'm the chair of the Economic and Community Development Committee. The city clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I'd like to call meeting 22 of the Economic and Community Development Committee to order. Meeting is called to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference. City staff are also connected to the meeting by video conference. As City Hall remains closed, the public will continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I ask everyone for their patience with any delays or technical issues that we may have today. We currently have about 12 registered speakers. We may have one or two more. The city clerk have connected all registered speakers to this meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Economic and Community Development Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, this is a paperless meeting. The clerk has provided all agenda material via CMP, the clerk's meeting portal. IT staff is available to help members with their devices if you should have any problems. I would like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they need to answer questions or speak to the committee. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on items. Members, please keep your mics muted unless you wish to question staff or speak on an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hands or unmute if they wish to question staff or speak. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask that members ensure that they turn on their videos and to raise their hands to indicate their votes. Members, I want to remind you that you must submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at ecdc@toronto.ca to help with your motions. If there are any visiting members of council attending today's meeting, and there are, we see Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Ainsley, welcome. You're no stranger to this committee. Delighted to have you. I would encourage you to turn on your video so that I know that you're here. And Councillor Ainsley, your video's turned on. That's how I know that you're here and so on. But obviously gives you opportunity to speak and ask any questions.
Thank you, Chair Thompson.
Yes. This will also assist the clerk staff to record your attendance for this meeting. Although we are meeting in different locations today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. Members, are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Okay, seeing none. We next need to motion to confirm the minutes from our last committee meeting, which was on April 27. Councillor Lai is moving the item. All those in favor of confirming the minutes from our last meeting? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Lai, and thank you, members. Okay, members, we are now going to proceed with the agenda review. We have 10 items on the agenda, and there will be a new business item from Councillor Carroll that will ensure that we have 11 items altogether. Members, I just want to remind you that we do have a special council meeting today scheduled for 12:30, and we're all required to be in attendance and so on. So I'm hoping that this meeting, we can conclude the business of this meeting by latest of 12:15 and give you a few minutes in order to prepare for the special council meeting. So I just wanted to remind you of the time sensitivity of this meeting so that you will govern yourself accordingly. The first item is EC 22.1, Toronto's Newcomer Strategy 2022 and 2026. There is a staff presentation on this item, so I'll hold this down. The next item is EC 22.2, Childcare and Early Years System, COVID-19 Response, and Childcare Growth Strategy. There's also a presentation on this item by staff, so I will hold that item down. The next item is EC 22.3, non-competitive contract with PRG, Production Resource Group, for the non-exclusive supply and delivery of technical product services to various mass immunization clinics and Show Love TO. What say you, members? Does anyone wish to hold this item or move?
I just have a couple of questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Carroll, we'll hold this in your name then. Okay, so we're holding that item. Thank you. The next item is EC 22.4, amendment to blanket contract number 470-20630, issued to Atridge Transportation Inc. for school bus services for homeless initiatives and prevention services. What say you, members? Vice Chair Grimes, are you moving? Yeah. Okay. Vice Chair Grimes moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. That item has been dealt with. The next item is EC 22.5, amendment to blanket contract number 470-22573 to ASP Incorporated for the provision of contracted security services at shelters and respite centers. What say you, members? Okay, Councillor Grimes is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. The next item is EC 22.6, non-competitive contract with Arjolet Canada for the purchase of proprietary sling accessories and the maintenance for existing residence lift system at various long-term care home locations. Okay, Councillor Grimes is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, members. The next item is EC 22.7, Parents Engaged in Education. We have a number of speakers on that item, so I will hold that item. The next item is EC 22.8, 5 and 2 Kitchen Food Security for Scarborough East. We have one speaker on that item, so I will hold that item. Okay, moving right along. The next item is EC 22.10. I'm sorry, the next item is EC 22.9, Evidence-Based Safe Reopening Plan for Live Music. Members, I have a motion on this item. Unless anyone wishes to hold this, I'm just looking at the screen. I do have a motion on this item. But what I'll do for the moment, I will just hold it down and then ask staff a question before I move the motion. So I'll hold that in my name. Thank you. And then the next item is EC 22.10, Toronto Music Advisory Committee. It's a letter from the chair of TMAC. And I have a motion on this particular item, unless anyone wishes to hold this to speak. Madam Clerk, would you put the motion up, please? Thank you. Members, the motion is on the screen, and the motion reads as follows: that the Economic and Community Development Committee refer the letter from Councillor Bradford to the General Manager of Economic Development for consideration. All right, so there's a motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We dealt with that item. All right, so the next item is the new business item from Councillor Carroll, prioritizing review of the peanut for potential inclusion as a neighborhood improvement area. Councillor Carroll, would you like to introduce your item, please?
Thank you. Yeah, this is just it's a follow-up motion. As we're not doing a whole wave, another local councillor moved a neighborhood that was sort of left out of the last round, and this is similar to that. It's simply to ask staff to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll add this to the agenda. Obviously, we'll vote to introduce and add this to the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll hold this item down in order to allow the clerk to put this item on the online so that it's available to the public for their viewing, and members also the opportunities for you to take some time to review that item. So I'll hold that item in your name, Councillor Carroll. All right, so moving right along, members, just going back to the first item that is a presentation by staff, and that's EC 22.1. We have a number of speakers on that item, but let's get the staff presentation first, and then we can invite the speakers to speak. Madam Clerk, I have the two speakers from staff, Ms. Denise Andrea Campbell, Executive Director, Social Development, Finance and Administration, and Vera Dodick as Manager of Toronto's Newcomer office. So, Ms. Campbell and Ms. Dodick, over to you.
Good morning, Deputy Mayor, committee members. Good morning. Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you a quick overview of the importance of newcomers in building our great city and the renewal of the Toronto Newcomer Strategy, which we hope you will endorse so our system can officially begin in 2022. Thanks, Vera. Immigration plays such an important role in our city. We often say that Canada is a land of immigrants. That is especially true for Toronto. We are a city of immigrants with 51.2% of Toronto residents foreign-born, coming out of 188 origin countries as compared to 18% nationally. Toronto, as you know, is a global center for business, finance, arts, and culture, and consistently ranked as one of the best cities in the world in terms of livability. It is the largest city in Canada and home to almost 8% of Canadians. With annual arrivals of 80,000 plus permanent residents, Toronto is the top immigration destination in Canada. We receive more than 25% of all immigrants to this country, with 1 in 5, or 500,000 people, arriving in the last 10 years alone. Toronto also receives the highest proportion of immigrants in classes that have more complex needs, such as refugees, refugee claimants, international students, and other temporary residents. They are not included in the 80,000 permanent residents that I just noted. Next slide, please. Immigration makes a significant economic, cultural, social impact and a contribution to our city. With an aging population, by 2034, immigration will account for 100% of population growth in Canada. Without new immigrants, our economic growth would slow down and the population would age more rapidly. In places like Thunder Bay, for example, this has been the case since 2007, and its economy has been growing at half the provincial average rate. Next slide, please. Immigrants accounts for nearly 1/4 of Canada's labor force in 2016, helping to offset the impact of this aging population. This trend is most obvious in Toronto, where in 2016, half of our workforce was comprised of immigrants, the highest proportion in Canada. As we know, newcomers bring new ideas and they work hard to build their lives in Toronto as their new home. Through their diverse cultures and contributions, Toronto has become one of the most vibrant global cities. Next slide, please. While there are structural challenges, which Vera will address next, recent immigrants are better educated than Canadian-born residents as a whole. Yet recent immigrants are often underemployed in comparison to Canadian-born workers who occupy a larger percentage of occupations requiring post-secondary education when compared to newcomers. In Toronto, it is taking longer for newcomers than anyone else to find adequate full-time, permanent employment. Their incomes are lower, and they sometimes work in 2 or 3 part-time jobs. At the same time, there are skill shortages in some professions, and some employers are having difficulty in filling those positions. This is a lost opportunity for our city and our economy, and there's also a significant long-term human impact. Over to you, Vera.
Thank you, Denise. Although many newcomers integrate successfully and many within a short period of time, our consultations highlight significant gaps and barriers to their potential. This slide shows just some. For example, lack of safe, affordable housing, lack of skill-appropriate employment, underemployment of newcomers. Access to services is problematic. Access to municipal services and supports has been particularly identified as a significant gap. Newcomers are not well informed about city services, and city staff, especially frontline, need to be trained about newcomers, about special considerations when serving undocumented residents. Newcomers have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 pandemic, and since 2013, since the strategy was adopted, the first strategy, there have been many policy shifts that impacted newcomers particularly. The COVID-19 pandemic had a direct and particular impact on newcomers. Data from Toronto Public Health shows that this population had higher COVID rates, higher percentage of positive COVID tests, and lower rates of COVID testing than Canadian-born and long-term residents. The pandemic has increased the barriers and challenges that some newcomers already faced. Precarious employment, lower pay, language barriers, and crowded and multi-generational households are just some factors that increase their infection rates. Precarious or lack of immigration status and lack of identification documents made circumstances even more challenging for some. And yet, many of them worked as essential workers and on the front lines. In addition, in 2020, Toronto has seen a 50% drop in permanent resident arrivals, and then even more significant drop in refugee claimant arrivals. This has been largely a consequence of restrictions to international travel and border closures, in particular the closure of the border between US and Canada. It is expected that once borders reopen and international travel becomes easier, that the arrivals will increase again, arrivals of refugee claimants, even beyond 2019 levels. It is necessary that the city works with our intergovernmental and community partners to prepare for that. It's been more than 8 years since the current strategy was adopted and Newcomer office established. Circumstances are markedly different from 2013. In particular, with the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a new urgency to refocus, to renew our strategy and our commitment. Toronto has a significant role in how newcomers to our city are welcomed and how they integrate. The city is a provider of key programs and services, many with a direct impact on newcomer settlement and integration. This, for example, includes transit, childcare, employment supports, recreation. The city is also a facilitator and convener. We mobilize others and work with others to coordinate and facilitate supports. For example, in 2016 and 2017, we worked together with many community and other partners to successfully welcome thousands of Syrian refugees. The city is also a collaborator and advocate. Many of the barriers that newcomers face are systemic and beyond the city's jurisdiction. and beyond the city's ability to resolve on its own. To address the systemic barriers, engagement and collaboration across governments, agencies, and sectors is necessary. Finally, Toronto is also home. It is home to the 500,000 newcomers that Denise mentioned. And these 500,000 newcomers are part of the 3 million people that live in Toronto, that come from 188 countries from around the world and speak 140 languages. This slide shows the 5 strategic priorities outlined in the Toronto Newcomer Strategy 2022-2026 as proposed. The strategy was developed based on comprehensive consultations, including with newcomers, jurisdictional and environmental scan, and advice from the sector leaders. I will move to the next slide. This slide shows our new proposed vision. We want newcomers living in Toronto to have a sense of belonging, well-being, and connectedness, that they feel safe, supported, welcome, and engaged. Our vision for the city is that the city is a leader in providing newcomers equitable access to municipal programs and services. And this is our final slide. People in these pictures are newcomers. And these are their stories, their statements about Toronto, and about why they chose Toronto as their home. These images have been part of the 7th annual Newcomer Day, Toronto Newcomer Day, which took place yesterday. All of the other photos from this slideshow have been taken during the 2019 Newcomer Day. The proposed Newcomer Strategy offers a roadmap for achieving a greater impact for newcomer success and ultimately Toronto's success. Thank you.
Thanks, Vera. Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Very much, Denise and Vera. Members, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to afford you the opportunity certainly to ask questions of staff, but I'd like to basically just ask the staff to step down and then to go to the speakers, have the speakers speak, and then allow members to ask questions. And some of those questions may refer to some of the comments that may be made by the speakers. Just in the interest of time, I think that we should facilitate in that way. So I look to members for their guidance. If there's any members who has any particular concerns with that, please let me know. Otherwise, we will proceed to calling there are only 2 speakers that I am aware of at this time. There could be more. So, okay, I think you are in concurrence then. I'm just seeing the screen. Okay, so Madam Clerk, you have speakers on this particular item. May I ask you to call the first speaker, please, in one moment. But just before you call the speakers, and I know the speakers can hear me as the chair, would like to just let the speakers know that they will have 5 minutes to speak. There is a clock, and if you're on the phone, you obviously can see the clock. But what I will do is, with 30 seconds left, I will just let you know that you have 30 seconds to complete your remarks. And at the 5 minutes, I will basically let you know that your time is up. So, Madam Clerk, I will ask you to call the first speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the first speaker is Lolirico from FCJ Refugee Center. Loli, are you connected?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Loli. You have
Good morning.
5 minutes. You have
Good
5
morning,
minutes.
Mr. Chair. Well, the FCJ Refugee Center, we help uprooted people overcome the challenges of rebuilding their lives in Canadian society. And with an open door approach, the center offers an integrated model of refugee protection, settlement services, and education, including shelter for women and children. We are here, Mr. Chair, to propose that to support the recommendations of the new strategy 2022-2026. What we are adding to this proposed recommendation is that at the time of the pandemic, we were witness of the importance to provide resources, especially as an example, the emergency fund for COVID-19 for people who didn't have access to any other emergency programs and they can be isolated. With this, proves that the Toronto Newcomer Strategy, and specifically the access to TO, was in need of a financial support and was very supportive for the people who doesn't have access to that. With this, we are requesting if the City of Toronto should have a permanent emergency fund for undocumented people and precarious migrants where they lose their jobs in situations like now in the pandemic, and they lose their homes and they end up in the shelters, which overflow the shelter system. If they have the emergency fund, they will be able to start a new life and maintain their house, and they can make better decisions. And the second item that we want to suggest is that in every recommendations that we were talking about access TO, the City of Toronto have been advocating with the federal government to have a regularization program for people who are undocumented or precarious migration. We're calling to the city again to do that, the recommendation to advocate with the federal government, specifically with the Minister of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada, to implement a regularization program. Why we are asking that the city can take that leadership is because the majority of the undocumented people are living in Toronto, in the biggest cities, and one of the things is that the City of Toronto has been leading with all the Toronto Newcomer Strategy and specifically to the Toronto Newcomer Day. And in that case, we believe that the City of Toronto will be the right place where they can advocate for that. This is my comments.
Thank you very much. Let me just check to see if there are any questions of you, Ms. Rico. Just seeing the screen. Doesn't appear to be any members of council wishing to question you on your comments. Thank you very much. All right, Madam Clerk, may I ask you to call the next speaker, please?
Certainly. The next speaker is, and apologies in advance for mispronouncing your last name, is Paulina Warshawski from the Toronto South Local Immigration Partnership Project, the Neighborhood Group, and St. Stephen's Community House.
Thank you. Paulina, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. So yes, I'm speaking today as a representative of the Neighborhood Group and the director of the Toronto South Local Immigration Partnership, which is a federally funded initiative led by the Neighborhood Group, which brings together over 60 agencies serving immigrants in South Toronto in order to create a welcoming community, identify gaps in existing systems of service provision, and remedy them through collaboration. So because we are a LIP, just as the Toronto Newcomer office is a LIP, we work very closely with the city in that regard. Our LIP is also one of the two co-leads on the National LIP Secretariat. So my work involves trying to look at the work of the LIPs and newcomer integration across Canada and work with 77 LIPs nationally. I'm here today to voice my organization's support for the Toronto Newcomer Strategy, and in particular, the goal of ensuring that the City of Toronto is a leader in providing newcomers with equitable access to municipal programs and services. At the heart of the strategy is the Access Toronto program and Toronto's commitment to being an equitable world-class city. However, I would also like to stress that I don't believe its goals can be accomplished without significant investment of resources, especially in the Toronto Newcomer office. This new strategy gives TNO even greater responsibility for coordinating initiatives and ensuring a newcomer lens is applied to all city initiatives. Yet I know that the TNO staff are already extremely stretched and are also tasked with doing all the external work of connecting with partners and providing support to direct service organizations because they are a local immigration partnership. So just to draw a direct comparison, for instance, my team and the TNO team are the same size. We each have 5 employees each. I regularly interact with around 100 stakeholders, both local and nationally. The TNO office, I believe, I'm estimating, but I would suspect they interact with around 200, 250 local stakeholders because they cut across the entire city. In addition, under this new strategy, they're also given the responsibility for shifting city structures and ensuring that a newcomer lens is applied to all city initiatives. I know that TNO has done great work in trying to facilitate the implementation of Access Toronto, but as the consultations have shown behind the strategy, there's simply too much need and not enough resources in that regard. The city employees need training on Access Toronto. There needs to be assistance with interpretation of the policy, a monitoring of consistent implementation. And again, the newcomer office at the City of Toronto is 5 people. It is my belief and my organization's belief that the office needs to have a more central position. They need to report directly to council on a regular basis. They are an expert on, I'm not an expert on city structures, but I can talk about some of the impacts and what makes me think they need to be more strategically positioned. They were very involved in the COVID-19 work, emergency work, right from the beginning. Yet despite TNO's involvement, it was very difficult to get the city to acknowledge quickly that newcomers were at the core of this crisis. Initially, a lot of the tables focused on issues such as housing and food security, which, I understand the reason behind that. But it felt like it was months before the city actually got on board with understanding that it was a newcomer crisis in many meaningful ways. And I know it's not due to the lack of efforts of TNO. I think it's due to the lack of traction for newcomer issues within sort of core decision-making at the City of Toronto. So to close, COVID has exacerbated existing inequalities, and to fully recover, newcomers need to fully recover within the City of Toronto because they constitute more than half of our population. And that means it's going to be all hands on deck for the Toronto Newcomer Office, for the City of Toronto. And so we really need your support and additional resources for those projects. And that's my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me see whether or not there are any questions of you. There are none. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your presentation. Okay, members, we are now going to go back to our city staff, and the opportunity for you to ask staff questions is now here. Councillor Cressy, I see your hands. You may begin, Councillor Cressy. You have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Denise and Vera, for the presentation. This can go to Denise or Vera. You talked about in 2019 that the city had at that point a record number of new refugee claimants and newcomers coming into our city. What numbers were we talking about in 2019?
So Councillor Cressy, Vera is going to, she's going to answer the questions today.
Okay, thanks.
In 2019, we have seen approximately 90,000 permanent residents arrived to our city and approximately 65,000 off the top of my head refugee claimants.
Okay.
That doesn't include temporary foreign workers, international students, visitors.
Okay, so around 150,000, and is that, when we go back in time, that was not 2019. Is it generally as a city, do we need to plan for and expect that, somewhere more than 100,000 permanent residents and refugees are likely joining our city on an annual basis? Is that, is that a general expectation if we go back in time?
Well, there are significant fluctuations in arrivals, not only to Toronto, but to many other places across Canada. The federal immigration levels plan has increased and has been increasing the last few years. And there are many reasons for that, including economic reasons, humanitarian reasons, etc. With the COVID-19 impacting immigration levels across Canada, there is a focused effort on the side of the federal government to facilitate more arrivals in the coming years. Without immigration, our population growth and economic growth would significantly slow down, and the population growth may even become negative.
And so from a systems planning point of view, you gave us a sense there in terms of the federal direction and also a bit of history around Toronto. My assumption here, and the report spoke to it, is that in 2020 and early into 2021, due to border closures and the COVID experience, the number of newcomers joining our city has been significantly lower in the last year and a half. Is that right?
That is correct. We have seen 50% less permanent residents. We have seen more than 60%, closer to 70% less refugee claimants arrive in 2020. Local numbers do not come fast enough to us, so we have to analyze, monitor, so that we have the numbers. But generally speaking, the drop is sharp.
So should we expect and be preparing for when we get through this COVID experience, when the border finally reopens, that we would that we might see a significant increase, at least in the first couple of years, given that there's been such a precipitous decline in permanent residents and refugee claimants in the last year and a half?
We will most definitely see a significant increase in refugee claimant arrivals, for sure. We estimate that the increase will be above 2019 levels. We are also monitoring what is happening around the globe, and we are seeing that in Europe, and you can also probably see this in the news as well, that that it's already starting. The arrivals are already starting, and countries around the globe are preparing. There is in a way, a pent-up demand,
yeah.
Or?
No, and so I guess just my final question, Mr. Chair, if it's all right then, is if you and your team were asked to report back on our expectations and resource planning to support that pent-up demand that you spoke to, looking to what other jurisdictions have experienced post-COVID. If you were asked to report back on the expectations, the service capacity, what we might need from all levels of government, is that something that staff would be able to come back to us with?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Vera. And Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Carroll to question next, and then Councillor Lai.
Yes, and actually it ends up being a follow-on to your answers to Councillor Cressy when you talk about the move already starting. I'm particularly concerned in some of my settlement areas. You know, we sort of perpetually canvass door to door because, you know, most settle and end up living vertically in the neighborhood in our, 60 cement slab tower block villages. And so we knock on doors to find those people who may not have reached out and accessed and to get a sense of who's coming in. Sometimes it's refugees, sometimes it's more formal immigration processes, but it's going door to door that helps us to find the people and tell them, did you know across the street there's a community health center, et cetera, et cetera. Given that we can't do that door to door person piece, how are we dealing with that? For those that have arrived immediately pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, and we got to make sure they access those supports. That's the one thing I wasn't clear, the real technicals in the report of how you go about doing that under these circumstances.
Well, the circumstances are challenging, and there are many newcomers. We mentioned 500,000, so going door to door is not an option. We are employing a number of different strategies through social media, for example. We are through flyers that we are distributing to public libraries, to our community partners. We translated a number of materials in the last year that are related to COVID-19, but also related to settlement services in 39 languages that we identified based on neighborhood level needs. So neighborhood level language needs, and then we distributed them within neighborhoods. Working with partners is always the best approach, we feel, because there are many smaller settlement agencies that work in neighborhoods, that know their neighborhoods, that have volunteers that can tremendously help communicate to newcomers about the existing services.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, as long as that's ongoing. I worry about it because I can't go in. And so I think,
Yes.
who's reaching them? Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Lai to question next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I'd like to start off by thanking Vera, very, very good briefing that you did with me. I really appreciate that. And I just have a few questions here. In terms of, you were saying that there were in 2019, the permanent residents is 90,000 and then 65,000 refugees. And you said we don't count international students. So do we categorize international students as newcomers as well?
The city's definition does include international students as newcomers. We don't. They are a separate statistic, but they are part of the newcomer group.
So, do you know how many international students that are in our city?
That number is not available. Unfortunately, data is collected at the federal and provincial levels, and there is a lag between us receiving that data from them and having the information available. But the number is significant, and it is one of the more vulnerable groups and especially impacted by COVID-19 as well.
And what about those economic immigrants? Are they categorized as well? Like, they come with investment in, categories in immigration.
Well, the permanent residents are the economic immigrants.
Oh, I see. Thank you. And do you have an idea what part of the city do they usually settle in? Any statistics on that?
They settle across the city, and there are pockets. There are many areas where newcomers traditionally settle in more, where they already have friends or family or have heard about an area. So we are very much aware in which areas newcomers predominantly live, but they live across the city.
Okay, so all over the city. Okay. The other question I would have is that I'm very happy that you said you partner with community groups and to provide service to them. And I know that in the consultation synthesis, Toronto is a service provider as an employer. Do we actually connect newcomers with people like border trade? And would we count border trade as one of the community partners that we're identifying here?
Board of Trade is a member of the City of Toronto's Newcomer Leadership Table. This is a table that meets quarterly, and we have regular conversations with the board and collaborate with them on immigration-related issues.
Yeah, that's very important because 33% of the Toronto newcomers are owners of a business. So I think it's quite important in that sense. The final question I have would be, well, by the way, thank you, congratulations on the on the Toronto Newcomer Day that just happened yesterday, and it was very, very good. And I tried to help to promote them as well, as a newcomer myself before. You were saying, I really appreciate that everything has been undertaken in multiple languages already, which is a very good thing that you're very proactive in doing these things because those are the needs. Is a website have multiple language on it? I mean, can they actually translate the website into different languages?
The website, the city's website has a feature where people can click on an icon at the bottom of every page and get the text translated into different languages.
Yeah, and just further on that one is your newcomer welcome brochure. It's very, very, very nice that you have that one. You have it in Arabic, Farsi, Spanish, Tamil, and simplified Chinese. Do you know why simplified Chinese and not traditional Chinese?
Well, that was based on recommendation from the federal government, who is our primary funder. The Newcomer Office receives 80% of our funding from the federal government to be a local immigration partnership and to fulfill a specific role. So in that way, we are restricted as far as what we can do.
I see. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lai. Okay, speakers. Councillor Cressy, you may begin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I can begin by placing an amendment with my deep thanks to Chair Thompson and city staff for working with this. The amendment specifically is for City Council to request our city staff to report back in the third quarter on the expected increase in refugee claimants arrivals to our city once the border reopens. And as part of that, to identify alongside our provincial and federal counterparts what the resource and capacity impacts on our city divisions will be, and also to determine how we can implement any needed changes as outlined in our Newcomer Strategy here to accommodate that pent-up demand that we expect will come. Building on just a couple high-level comments. I mean, as a city, we talk about diversity, our strength. And there is no question that newcomers make our city stronger, culturally, economically, and also from a compassionate moral perspective. We are, as a welcoming city, newcomers make us stronger. But I always like to remind people that diversity may be a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And it is up to us as a city, alongside our provincial and federal counterparts, to create the systems and the bridges and to break down the barriers to ensure that we are a welcoming city and an inclusive city. And I have to tell you, the Newcomer office, our Toronto Newcomer office, is seen as a worldwide leader in building bridges, building access, and breaking down barriers. You know, when Montreal a couple of years ago set up their own Newcomer office, it was modeled on our work. And they came and they looked to Toronto for how to do it. And that's a real testament to the broad partnership model with all of our newcomer agencies who are paving and leading the way on the ground and working with us, but also our civil service. You heard briefly here from Denise and Mira Dodic. They are a small but mighty team and world-renowned and respected for their work. And so when we look to this next phase of our Newcomer Strategy, as we look to 2022 to 2026, it's an opportunity, I think, to not only build upon and improve upon the work that we're doing today, but it's also an opportunity coming out of COVID to ensure that we are prepared for a new world that will be emerging, a world where there's going to continue to be increased movement, increased instability, and for our city, the opportunity to be a welcoming place, a place of sanctuary, and a place of economic vitality. And so I want to thank our staff, thank Chair Thompson for his leadership on his file, and in particular for working with me on this amendment. And let's keep improving on this work. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. Councillor Lai to speak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I cannot echo enough Councillor Cressy's comment about what a mighty office with just 5 employees and the amount of work that you've done, and to make us so proud. And Vera, I really, really commend all the work and your hard work. And Denise, you should be very proud of that office. The Newcomers office is very, very, we are the model of different cities and being the biggest cities, and we are the leader, and it's very, very good. But I really, really was very happy that we're doing such a good job. Because as a newcomer myself, I was a newcomer many, many moons ago, but I haven't had this kind of welcome by the city as now. I mean, the newcomers nowadays are more lucky than those ones that came here a longer time ago. So I think we should keep up with the good work. And I really wanted to stress on the importance of the multiple languages, breaking barriers for newcomers who don't speak English, especially international students. And you mentioned, Vera, that they are one of the vulnerable groups, especially during COVID-19. And you have no idea how they are when they're living out from, outside of them, from their homeland. But mind you, though, they are the one that drives the economics in the city, because, they're spending money here. They are paying the tuition fee and they all that. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that we should not be treating the one who does not spend money here. I mean, the refugees, we have to be very compassionate. We have to treat them the same. And very, very important that we have to prove to the world that diversity is our strength, actually. And I really wanted to like to see the next 5 years going forward. And I would be working closely with the office to how to see we can improve what we can do here to make it a better strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lai. Just seeing whether or not there are any more speakers on this item. Okay, seeing none, I just wanted to add my voice to this and to support Councillor Cressy in his motion and his leadership there, and to all of you, Ms. Campbell and Ms. Dodick, outstanding work. Vera, I have to say this, the comments that I hear about you is that you're cool because of things you do, quite frankly. So I hope you're good with that, because when people say to me, the Newcomer office is a pretty interesting place, great work they do, and they say to me, well, Vera, she's cool. So I wanted just to communicate that to you and so on, and just to thank you for your outstanding work. And just to say this to everyone, quite frankly, Newcomers create a level of prosperity for all of us. If you think about it, what they do and what they contribute help us to grow and to develop into a better economy in so many ways, and not only in terms of the cultural benefits that we get and so on, the intellectual benefits that we get a lot of things from them. And what we offer is actually a small amount in terms of the exchange. And I think we need to remember that, because oftentimes people say to me, why are we spending money on these people and so on? Well, we're spending actually in our best interests and in their best interests and so on. So there's a mutual benefit that's associated with this whole process. And so people need to understand this. It isn't simply a one-way street. If you look at it in that narrow way, you may think that somehow this is an expense for us, but really it's a great credit on the ledger and side of things. On the credit side, we're benefiting. On the other side, it's actually a contribution that we make that actually helps our benefit and so on. So great work, Vera, and thank you again. And I will actually concur that you are cool. So thank you. All right, so members, we have a motion that has been presented by Councillor Cressy. So with respect to Councillor Cressy's motion, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that's carried. Item as amended, all those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. That item has been dealt with. All right, moving right along, and I just want to remind everyone of the time constraints that we actually have. We still have a number of speakers. We're moving on to the next item, EC 22.2, Childcare and Early Years System, COVID-19 Response, and Childcare Growth Strategy. So Shanley McNamee, who is the General Manager of Children's Services, is here to make her presentation. Ms. McNamee?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson, and good morning to committee members and visiting councillors. So I'm very happy to come here today and present to you really a bit of a narrative on what's been happening in the childcare sector, particularly the last 18 months. So initially, Children's Services was anticipating a report back to Council on the Childcare Growth Strategy in 2020. However, this was interrupted by the pandemic. So today I'm going to provide an update on the progress of the Growth Strategy Phase 1, provide some insights into the impacts of COVID that have had on the sector, and confirm the key priority actions that are being undertaken to stabilize the sector and ready it for growth. Next slide, please. So this presentation begins with an overview of the achievements of the Growth Strategy Phase 1. And just by way of reminder, in April 2017, City Council adopted the Childcare Growth Strategy, which was a 10-year vision to build capacity, improve affordability, and support a thriving workforce. In November 2017, we brought a Phase 1 implementation plan to Council that set specific targets in these areas for the period of 2017 to 2019. In the plan, we set a goal of reaching 40,000 spaces for children 0 to 4 by the end of 2019, and we achieved 39,177 spaces by adding 40 spaces to the system, which represents a 7.5% increase from 2016. Of these new spaces, 860 were through capital investment, and the remaining were from maximizing existing operator capacity, so expansions, retrofits within the existing sector. In terms of affordability, we aim to reduce the average fees by up to 10% for centres charging the highest fees. Through base funding investments to operators to centres with service agreements, we achieved a 7.7% fee reduction among centres with the highest fees. For a family with an infant and a preschool child paying for care at one of these centres, the savings would represent approximately $3,600 annually. In terms of wages, we aim to increase average wages by up to 6% for centres paying the lowest wages, and we achieved a wage increase of 8.1% for registered early childhood educators and 13% for assistants. These results demonstrate the effectiveness of the investments from all orders of government and the effectiveness of a targeted approach to achieve these objectives. Next slide, please. Toronto's childcare growth strategy was built on a demand study which provided valuable insights. However, the pandemic has created substantial upheaval in labour markets and in parental employment and schooling for their children. The long-term impacts of COVID on demand for childcare are still unknown. Regardless of any such shifts related to COVID, it was clear before the pandemic that Toronto's licensed childcare system required a long-term vision which was set out in the growth strategy. These core principles remain. The growth strategy phase 2 was set to continue in 2020. Continued growth and expansion was interrupted by COVID and the impacts it's had on the sector. Children's Services continues in its request of other orders of government for increasing and sustainable multi-year operating and capital funding to achieve the vision laid out in the growth strategy. Recent federal transformation opportunities announced very much align with the principles of the growth strategy, and we see these as an opportunity to expedite and advance these goals. Next slide, please. On April 19th, the Government of Canada released the 2021 federal budget, which included a substantial multi-year commitment of $30 billion over 5 years and $8.3 billion ongoing thereafter to build a national early learning and childcare system. These commitments align well with the growth strategy's vision of reducing fees for families, increasing system capacity, and increasing wages for the workforce. Children's Services has mechanisms in place to administer funding to operators as new growth investments are committed and to achieve the alignment with contractual obligations and provincially and council-approved service targets. Operator and sector-wide financial performance is monitored through annual budget processes and reporting, which includes tracking indicators on parent fees and workforce compensation. As with past investments in affordability and compensation, the division works with intergovernmental partners and the sector to achieve the desired outcomes, such as reducing parent fees and improving wages. Children's Services will report to Council on the city's share of new committed funding and policy and operating terms and conditions coming out of the federal announcement once they are known. Next slide, please. The social and economic changes wrought by COVID are widespread and have had extensive consequences for the childcare system and families. Changes to employment have meant that more people are in precarious work, they have lost work or less work hours, or are underemployed. These impacts have not been equitably distributed, with women experiencing a drop in labor force participation 3 times greater than men. Lone parents, who make up 62% of our fee subsidy clients, have also seen a much larger drop in labor force participation. These inequitable impacts of the economic fallout of COVID have disproportionately affected Black, Indigenous, and racialized groups. Changes in remote work and virtual school have affected a large number of families. The combination of the two has meant that many families are choosing to take care of their children at home or provide homes or provide schooling support at home if they're able to. Families also have health and safety concerns when it comes to sending their children to care. These health and safety concerns also impact the early childhood educators working in centers who are facing significant stress. Next slide, please. In Toronto, where demand for childcare was historically high with few spaces, we've seen a large drop in demand. Children's Services is closely tracking vacancies in the system and monitoring enrollment on both a system-wide and center-based level. System-wide, as of mid-March, there was a vacancy rate of 54%, with some centers experiencing higher vacancy rates than others. A recent study by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives has shown that cities where childcare is the most expensive have seen the greatest drop in childcare enrollment. The ongoing unaffordability of childcare in Toronto may continue to constrain demand in recovery from COVID, and it points to the ongoing importance of the growth strategy and new investments. Next slide, please. While Children's Services does directly deliver childcare through our city-operated centres, we are also the legislated service system manager for the sector. With over 1,000 childcare programs in Toronto, we have a very important role in terms of system management, planning, etc. Not surprisingly, the impact on operators has been particularly hard on the childcare sector, particularly in the areas of capacity, funding, and enrollment. Financial pressures have arisen from increased expenditures related to PPE, health and safety, screening, and particularly reduced revenue from loss of parent fees. I have to say, though, the sector has been remarkably successful at reopening under new health and safety measures. As of April 2021 and prior to the third lockdown of childcare, 94% of licensed childcare centres had reopened following mandated closures in 2020. The reason such a large number of centres have managed to stay afloat is largely because of funding from all orders of government. Federal support programs, especially the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, have been critical support for the sector. One-time federal Safe Restart funding of $47.5 million was delivered in Q3 2020 and was targeted for early years in childcare to enable enhanced staffing, cleaning, PPE, etc. It also was able to support the loss of revenue as a result of vacancies. An additional $17.8 million in provincial reinvestment funding was distributed to the licensed sector in Q1 2021. These federal and provincial supports, in addition to base funding, these subsidy advances have largely been successful in financially stabilizing the sector to date. Despite this relative success, Children's Services recognizes that this is still a very precarious position that operators continue to face, driven by long-lasting uncertainty about recovery and when they'll be able to resume full service. Next slide, please. And in terms of our family, in November 2020, Children's Services conducted a survey of families who had either had a subsidy or were previously on the wait list for a subsidy, but had not returned to childcare. We received over 4,000 responses. We really reached out to better understand the barriers that they were experiencing returning to care. 42% of families said they were unsure when they'd need care or they'd wait until the pandemic was over. 60% of families said they were worried about health and safety. The results indicated that the return to care was based on many factors beyond their control or that can't be predicted, such as finding work, returning to in-person work or school, waiting for more people to be vaccinated, or even waiting for the pandemic to end. Finally, families expressed facing significant financial hardship, with over 45% of families reporting either not working anymore or working fewer hours. Next slide, please. The impacts of COVID-19 have also had impacts on the childcare and early years workforce. The workforce has faced significant added duties and work-related stress without commensurate recognition or compensation. Childcare staff were not included in the temporary pandemic pay program, and they faced a significant uncertainty as to their inclusion with education workers in the phase 2 of vaccination rollout. Thankfully, that has been addressed, and childcare workers have been eligible for vaccination for a couple weeks now. These uncertainties are especially problematic given the essential nature of childcare work and the fact that, in childcare, while the staff are fully masked and gowned and whatnot, children and the younger age children do not and cannot wear masks. So it does cause, quite a bit of stress. According to a survey by the Association of Early Childhood Educators Ontario and the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare, the majority of early years staff respondents in Toronto stated that their job-related stress has increased. Over half, 52%, said their job dissatisfaction decreased, and 42% said they would consider leaving the early years sector. What this really points to is the critical importance of a workforce strategy and supports going forward and the need for improvements to the wages of childcare workers. Next slide, please. Despite the pandemic's impacts, we have worked to protect progress made under phase 1 of the growth strategy. Progress made on fees and wages was protected by continuing to provide operators with stable base funding at the same levels they received in 2019. Capital projects were not impacted and construction continues on existing developments. In addition, new capital programs in partnership with school boards and funded by the province have been progressing through the planning stages. The growth strategy phase 2 has been impacted because recent investments flowing to the sector have been dedicated to stabilization rather than reducing fees and increasing wages. In 2020 and 2021, while there was additional funding provided for supports, there has been no additional funding from other orders of government to advance the growth strategy. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the response and recovery priorities Children's Services has taken, and they've been grouped under 3 broad areas, including family access, financial stability, and workforce supports. To support families to access care, we have maximized eligibility for fee subsidy within the provincial guidelines to sustain families' access to a fee subsidy where possible. We've leveraged our My Child Care account, an online tool for clients to be able to manage their fee subsidy file digitally, and we shifted early on programming to online and partnered with SCFA at the community cluster tables to enhance wraparound supports for families. Looking forward, we continue to expand our outreach to families and pilot more intensive outreach and placement supports for families. And we continue to work with our community partners and continue to monitor and adjust subsidy eligibility policies in a responsive way so that families facing changing situations are well supported. To support the financial stability of operators, we have repurposed existing funding provided by the province to provide predictable base funding and delivered the federal restart and provincial reinvestment funds, all with an aim of protecting the system's existing capacity. We allocated funding using a targeted approach that provided additional support to childcare and early on centres more heavily impacted by COVID. Looking forward, we'll continue to strategically invest with our allocation and provide those targeted supports to programs facing greater financial hardship. Also, those programs affected by lockdown measures. We have also established a support process for centres, individual centres who may be facing more acute financial difficulties. And to support the workforce, we have temporarily paused the assessment for quality improvement program and shifted those resources to focus on supporting staff and operators, including delivering guidance, training, and mentoring to childcare staff and operators in partnership with Toronto Public Health, providing virtual community of practice live group sessions, and quality and pedagogy virtual visits. In April 2021, Children's Services directed resources towards vaccine education, specifically tailored to the early years in childcare workforce. Looking forward, we will continue to advocate for the early years workforce among our governmental partners and develop new partnerships such as with the colleges of VCEs and to continue to explore strategies to improve recruitment and retention in the sector. Next slide, please. While Children's Services continues, it's my final slide, and what now? Children's Services continues to lead strategic, immediate response and recovery actions for the sector to preserve existing capacity. We will continue to convene, collaborate, and advocate on system-wide issues impacting children, families in the sector. Once the federal announcement is read into legislation and more details are known, and hopefully we have a clear framework on a national strategy, we see this as an opportunity to drive future growth strategy implementation plans. We will use that opportunity as well as learnings from phase 1, new census data, a look at the current economic conditions, and figure out what the impact is and plan for strategic renewal. While progress has been made in phase 1 of the growth strategy, many factors affecting children, families, and the sector are outside of the city's control and involve other partners. However, the city remains committed to the growth strategy vision. Provincial and federal investments, policy, and service targets, being the most influential and impactful, are needed now more than ever. While the growth strategy approach with strong policy, conditions, and investments will ensure progress continues to be made for families and children, and they will all continue to benefit. Thank you.
Very much, Madam Clerk. We have one speaker, and members, I'm going to do the same as we did with the previous item. We have one speaker, so Madam Clerk, could you call the speaker, please? And while you're doing that, I'd just like to let the speaker know that they will have 5 minutes to speak, and at the 4 minutes and 30 seconds mark, I will let you know you've got 30 seconds remaining. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So the public speaker on this item is Abigail Doris from Toronto Community for Better Childcare. Abigail, are you connected?
This is Abigail. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Abigail. Good morning.
Fantastic.
You may begin.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. As mentioned, my name is Abigail Doris. I'm a registered early childhood educator and the executive coordinator for the Toronto Community for Better Childcare. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to Toronto Children's Services staff for their principled and extensive report that very clearly outlines the impacts of the pandemic on the childcare sector and the importance of the growth strategy as a means of navigating our way to building back a better city. This report so clearly represents the concerns of families, frontline childcare staff, and nonprofit childcare centers. The childcare sector has largely felt ignored by the provincial government throughout the pandemic, and this has been outlined in a recent report, Forgotten on the Front Line, from the Association of Early Childhood Educators Ontario and the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. So to have the municipal government support and truly understand the key role of community building and social infrastructure that childcare plays in supporting children and families, it doesn't go unnoticed. This growth strategy is a powerful move in the right direction and demonstrates the opportunity for Toronto to play a key leadership role as the federal childcare system rolls out. This is an opportunity for Toronto to be transformative in building a childcare system that truly centralizes the needs of children and families in communities across our city, while also striving to ensure that all early childhood educators and childcare staff have decent work and compensation for the vital care they provide. The report states that Toronto Children's Services has communicated to other orders of government a request to contribute to these national discussions as soon as possible and bring the expertise of managing the second largest childcare system in Canada to the table. This is so critical. As this report reinforces the city's nonprofit stance on childcare, it's important that other regions across Canada have the opportunity to see how the City of Toronto prioritizes quality childcare as social infrastructure for our city. This growth strategy presents the opportunity for the City of Toronto to influence the provincial and federal government in a deeply meaningful way. The report clearly outlines how critical the need for decent work is for childcare workers. It states, a well-compensated and highly trained workforce is essential to delivering high-quality childcare that leads to positive outcomes for children. As one of the 13,000 registered early childhood educators and thousands more childcare workers in Toronto, I cannot express how valuable this is that the municipal government not only recognizes the existing professionalization gap in our sector, but also works toward closing that gap. We are a feminized, racialized workforce, and this growth strategy represents a critical shift in how we as a society view and value care work. And finally, we've learned so much from delivering emergency childcare throughout the pandemic, and we now have a window of opportunity for the city to be leaders in developing a flexible model within the regulated nonprofit childcare system. I encourage the city to be boldly transformative in their approach to supporting families, many working non-standard hours, part-time hours, or multiple jobs. Our current enrollment rate is sitting around 45%. This, of course, is directly related to the pandemic and high childcare fees. Families simply can't afford childcare right now. It also relates to families experiencing job insecurity and the ongoing school closures. So we have this moment, this one moment, to pilot flexible models within the regulated nonprofit system that meet the needs of shift workers, first responders, healthcare workers, part-time workers, and any family that needs it. By taking on this bold leadership that centralizes the needs of families, Toronto can once again demonstrate to the provincial and federal government what quality care looks like and how it can be achieved. This will likely need some capital funding and for the growth strategy to account for inflation, but everyone in our city depends on someone who depends on childcare. So this would ultimately be an investment in us all. Thank you for your time today. And again, thank you to the Children's Services staff for this very principled report. And we very much look forward to the city's continued leadership on childcare. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Storrs. Let me see whether or not there are any questions from members of committee. I see none. Thank you very much. Now, members, we are going to ask the staff to prepare themselves for questions from members. I have the first questioner is Councillor Carroll. You have 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, Shanley. I'm going to cut to the chase because we're pressed for time now that they've called this special council meeting, so I don't want to frustrate the chair. As you know, you mentioned it in your report. You've been talking to and collaborating with the Coalition of Childcare Service Support Organizations, and they've asked me to move motions that are pretty much in your presentation. You've indicated this is work that you're going to be doing anyway. The question is, are these friendly motions to you? What they're looking for is some sort of commitment that they thought by the third quarter. I suspect it's going to take us till the fourth quarter because we're going to want to see who walks in the door in September. But right now, you don't really know how that federal money plays out in Toronto in the immediate. And you don't really know how reopening is going to look in the work environment. But what they're hoping is that they can ask you to craft your prediction of that by the end of this year so that they can really see where the growth strategy can go in 2022 and beyond. Are motions to that effect friendly as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Yes, I would agree with your assessment. The federal announcement is expected to be read into legislation not till the fall. So the third quarter is really going to be premature. We don't expect that there'll be anything new, and that will be really critical, both the policy decisions and how they plan to operationalize it. So I think a fourth quarter would be much more realistic. And then in terms of what the sector looks like reopening, again, 50% of our childcare sector is in school. A lot of dependencies are going to be based on whether children return to in-person school, whether there's virtual learning. All of that will impact demand. So I would again say the fourth quarter we'll have better sense of are children back in school. Are they continuing at home and virtual learning? And is the demand are we seeing the demand increase? And so I'm quite agreeable to coming back and reporting that, but I think realistically to have new and current and information that's valuable, we're looking at the fourth quarter.
Right. So the caveat then would be that the follow-up question would be, have you had this conversation with the city manager and with the CFO that if that's the case, if we're going to get this this information really into a workable format by the fourth quarter, not the third, are they leaving some breathing space in the budget process that you may be making some last minute recommendations on the basis of all of that coming late in the year?
Thank you, Councillor. My experience working with finance is that they have been very flexible with children's services. Very often, our funding from the province or the federal government comes, right towards the end of the budget cycle, and it's not unusual that we need to walk on, last minute announcements, and we've always had that flexibility.
Okay, fantastic. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair, and with apologies, I was kind of late signing off by email with the clerks, but I hope that by now you have the motions that I'm going to move. Thanks.
Councillor Carroll, I just see whether or not there are any other questioners. Okay, I see now. Councillor Carroll, would you like to speak on this item?
Yes, if the clerks want to put the motion on the screen, I hope by now they can. Yeah, there they are. And so, councillors, the motion that I'm moving, because it's so so wordy here, I hope that you can read as I speak, and then we can have it consider as read rather than my reading them fully out loud. But basically, what they are is really just putting into motions the things that in our presentation we heard are the work that Ms. McNamee is going to be working on anyway. What the coalition of childcare providers and childcare activists want to see is just sort of building a calendar around it so that they can begin to be predictable about the way the program proceeds and the growth strategy proceeds in future years. They suggested these motions after collaborating with Shanley, and as we just discussed, they had third quarter, but it's now looking like we're really going to have to ask for that sort of special treatment in the budget process, because we really need a sense of what returning to work is looking like in that third quarter. And so to report back to us in committee and for us to be able to properly inform the rest of council, we really need the fourth quarter. I would hate to have to do sort of a midterm report to meet a deadline of third quarter, and then we're going to be wanting a new picture in January. That's more work than we want staff to be doing, because we want them to be doing the collaboration and the sort of nimble response that we've just been hearing about. And so that's why the motions are timed the way they are. But other than that, the content is really along the lines of what that community was hoping that we would add to Shanley's recommendations about the other orders of government today. My last comment, Mr. Chair, and I know that you were probably going to do this and wrap up, but having heard the presentation and all the actions that it has taken to steer this system through the pandemic thus far, I hope everyone joins me in saying, boy, this has to be the most unsung division in terms of the amount of change that they have had to deal with, from senior staff right on down to the frontline operator. Huge difference in what they've had to do, but it's not the sexy stuff like talking about vaccination rollouts and testing rollouts and things like that, or that everyday picture that people have, whether they have children or not, of what's happening in the transit system. But man, oh man, has Children's Services ever had to really roll a boulder up the hill for now 14 months. And so I move that motion, but I also want to say thank you so much for what you have been able to do. And I am hoping that with a strategy that improves on wages but lowers fees, that people will come back to the system, because it really is the best place for your kids to be while we're all working as hard as we're going to have to work to rebuild this economy. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Thank you for your comments there. Let me just take a moment to quickly to speak on this item, and I have a motion. Maybe just ask the clerk to put the motion up, please. All right, so the motion's on the screen, members, and the motion reads as follows. The City Council recognizes the contribution that early childhood educators have made throughout the pandemic, and it speaks to what Councillor Carroll was speaking about, in providing essential services to Toronto's communities for supporting children's healthy development and learning, and contributing to the economic recovery. And two, that City Council requests the General Manager of Children's Services to develop and implement a communication strategy that emphasizes the value of early learning and childcare professions and the contribution these workers make to the well-being of our children, families, and communities, and so on. And I think it's extremely important that Ms. Doris talked about what this profession does, and the work is to be commended, and the importance of this work. I simply want to just say, add my voice and support to this, but also to recognize, as Councillor Carroll has done so eloquently, the outstanding work that has been done by the folks in childcare, led by Shanley McNamee, and all of the conversations, some late afternoon, late evening, and early morning, Shanley, you and I and your team, and you have had with members of committees and so on, has demonstrated a strong sense of understanding in terms of your strategic direction and addressing the issues and ensuring that, for example, our frontline workers, first responders, and so on are able to take their children someplace safe in order to protect them and so on. And I think it's extremely important. So this work is it's work that has demonstrated its value, and you talk about economic recovery and the benefits associated with helping parents and so on, but most importantly, helping children in our city. And they are our future, and we need to ensure that we invest. And just finally, with respect to the people who work in this area, which are a vast number of people who recognize the importance of childcare, my hat, I salute you for what you do. And I do think, quite frankly, in terms of wages, this is an area that we have to reinforce, that we have to ensure that we pay for the value and the valuable contribution that you make. And we must advocate and support that process as part of our efforts to ensure the recognition of the work that is done on a daily basis by all of the amazing people in this sector. So thank you very much, Ms. McNamee and members committee. Those are the two motions that Councillor Carroll's moving. I don't see anyone else listed to speak. So with that, I'll just move along. So on the first item, the first motion is Councillor Carroll's motion. I'm just waiting for it to pop up on the screen. Okay, here it comes. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And then I have the motion that I read. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. Item as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. So we're moving along to the next item. And Councillor Carroll, you had expressed an interest in asking question on EC 22.3, non-competitive contracts with contract with PRG, a production resource group. Councillor
Well,
Carroll?
actually, Mr. Chair, staff have gotten in touch with me offline in the interim. So unless others have questions, I can just speak to it and move it.
Okay, you actually have the floor, Councillor Carroll. You may speak. And
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, I can simply move the staff recommendations. The only reason I held it was I wanted to ask questions about the breakdown, the services that PRG are helping us with are, vaccination clinics are kind of an event. So you're promoting them and then putting them together. So they're the best in the business, which is why this is a non-competitive program. They were best positioned really to be able to respond at that time. But I had questions about the Show Love TO part of it. because it is a significant fraction. And I wanted to know where Show Love is going. But I understand we are going to be getting an update later in this committee, Mr. Chair. So I got enough information to just move the recommendations, and I look forward to the update on their work.
Okay, members, so Councillor Carroll is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving along, and remember, just remind members, we do have a time crunch. We must finish this meeting by 12:15. All right, so the next item that I have on my list for the agenda here, just running through to make sure I've covered everything, coming to EC 22.7, parents engaged in education. We have a number of speakers on this particular item. This is an item that Councillor Aisley has sponsored. All right, so Madam Clerk, just before I ask you to call the first names of the speakers, just want to let the speakers know that they will have 5 minutes to speak. At the 4 minutes and 30 seconds mark, if you're speaking still at that point, I will notify you that you have 30 seconds. After you've spoken, members of the committee may ask you questions. And at that point, you can answer as you see fit to the questions that's been asked. And so, Madam Clerk, I would like to ask you to call the first speaker, please. And we do have Councillor Ainsley is with us on this item as well.
Mr. Chair, the first public speaker is Teresa Pastor from Parents Engaged in Education. Teresa, are you connected?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Ms. Pastor. You may begin.
Good morning. I will summarize very quickly to allow some time for questions. I know you're short on time this morning. When COVID hit, Parents Engaged in Education pivoted our work immediately to support our most vulnerable youth. And we built 2,000 Learn at Home kits and distributed them through charities as part of the Toronto COVID Partnership Table. Through that experience, we came to know that there needed to be a much more permanent source of supply that empowered our most vulnerable youth, children and teens, to provide them with choice and ownership by offering brand new school supplies, great books, fun activities, mental health resources, and amenities for self-care. At Parents Engaged in Education, we know that simply giving vulnerable youth materials without giving them skills to utilize them to their fullest potential, we address this issue by forming the Education Bank Kids Club, where students are given the opportunity to gain skills and increase their academic goals through STEM camps, book clubs, essay contests, 3D printing course and competition, speed mentorship programs with leading Canadian companies, and much more. Our goal is not to hand out, but to raise up all children and teens that are clients at the center. We see the difference in the children when they first come into the Education Bank, where they present with difficulty looking our volunteers in the eyes, speaking, and believing they get to choose what they want or need to support their minds and spirits. By the time they leave, after interacting with our volunteers, they're smiling, they're talking, and asking when they can come back. The majority of these kids will struggle to meet the academic goals that will allow them to build the future and achieve their dreams. We aim to change the current trend by providing these youth the support they need to not just operate at level, but above level as they work to be their best self. COVID has impacted the communities we serve more harshly than any other area of the city. When we planned for 2021, we expected to serve approximately 200 children a month, with the majority coming from Scarborough's East End. As schools opened and closed through 2020 and 2021, the needs to support families increased dramatically. Since the last stay-at-home order on April 12, 2021, the Education Bank has served approximately 850 children and teens. Those statistics are as of May 22nd. This means that in just over 5 weeks, we have served 4 times the number we had planned to support. Why are these increases being seen? There is more awareness of our services in the city. So more youth workers, other charities, and Ontario Work, social workers, and people like that are becoming aware of our services and sending families to access our services. There has been outreach from all areas of Toronto, and we are setting up to provide curbside pickup at more vulnerable areas like Jane and Finch, Dorset Park, and many other areas of the city. We're working with school boards and others to be able to increase our outreach without having parents have to travel all the way to Scarborough. The stay-at-home order eliminated families' ability to use discount stores for their children's immediate needs for support, for learning and activities. Our families, on whole, do not have credit cards or could not afford to buy on traditionally priced retailers. For parents, we work to encourage and provide skill-building opportunities to help parents understand how important it is to be involved in their children's education. They need to be empowered to have a voice for their children at school, which is one of the biggest challenges many of parents in our low-income communities face. This may occur because of their previous experience in their home country, or because our schools are not always doing proper outreach to include these parents.
You have 30 seconds to complete.
Okay. The other work we've always done anonymously is we support youth in mental health wards and hospitals. We support young people coming out of human trafficking situations. We support police and youth workers when children are relocated due to domestic abuse. And we support women and children in domestic shelters. In conclusion, I would state that while we've always accepted that we need food banks to feed bodies, we've left a huge gap in feeding their minds and spirits.
Thank you.
Thank you.
5 minutes. All right, let me check to see if there are any questions for you, ma'am. Visiting Councillor Ainsley, the question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Teresa, can you explain a bit about, so currently you're located in an industrial park in Morningside in the 401. Prior to that, you were in the gymnasium of a TCHC building?
Correct. We're actually in a retail. We're in a retail mall at Milner and Morningside.
Yeah. So, but you're not very close. You were much closer previously. You were in the middle of a neighborhood improvement area. Now, if children want to access your bank, they would have to take a TTC bus. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so, ideally, what you would like to see is a permanent home in, hopefully, a space that the City of Toronto owns.
Yes, for financial reasons especially. I mean, where we're situated now, we're centrally located to many improvement areas. You know, we are focused also on delivering items from the Education Bank through community police so that we keep families off the TTC to curb spread.
Right. So I understand one of the things you had to go to the TTC to ask for bus fare or financial support because many of the students that use or access your facility needed bus fare as well.
Yes.
Okay. And are you receiving any funding from the provincial government?
No.
Part of the motion,
none.
my motion is asking for the city staff to engage the provincial government as well as the Ministry of Education. You're not receiving any provincial funding?
No, we are not. We
Okay.
receive no government funding.
Okay. Although you're serving over 850 students. Sorry, is that a month or a week or?
That's been in 5 weeks.
In 5 weeks, you've looked after 850 students. And could you explain a little more, Teresa, about you said you're running an education bank. Could you elaborate on some of the services that you're providing? I know that we've talked about you would like to have some type of larger library space, a computer hub so kids can learn more. And kind of piggybacked onto that, I also know that you've been very successful in engaging a number of publishers and also technology companies. So you've been able to give away laptops as well, correct?
Correct. We put over 200 laptops into the system in the last 6 months. And we also, at the Family Service Center, which houses the Education Bank, we have a Big Little Learners Corner, an art center, a technology center. We have a Black Heritage Celebration Circle, an Indigenous Heritage Celebration Circle, and an area where we support parent engagement, as well as the Education Bank itself.
Okay. And Teresa, what ultimately, put this, what ultimately gave you the, I guess, motivation or the desire to create Parents Engaged in Education?
We believe that every child deserves the opportunity to be their best self. We believe that the next Prime Minister could come out of our center and our communities if they're given the opportunity and support they need to be confident in working towards their future.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Teresa. Those are my questions, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. I bring the matter into committee. Councillor Carroll, please.
Sorry, I have a question now. I wasn't going to ask any questions because I know we'll be moving a motion, but this isn't so much, whether to direct staff to do something or not, but how and what should we be directing them? So I'm wondering if Teresa could give me a sense. It sounds like you want to provide specific programs. You're concerned about people taking the TTC, but I also heard in your deputation, and here's where I need clarification, that you're serving people as far away as Jane and Finch. So is the need for space to have a big clearing center to be able to serve a lot of neighborhoods, or are you trying to create a base in a particular neighborhood? I'm confused now.
The ideal situation is that there would be education banks in various parts of the city serving the communities that are needy. However, we aren't privileged with that right now as we seek funding. So what we are doing is working with school boards and others to provide a curbside pickup location. So they would have staff pick up kits that their community have ordered and arrange spots where they can be picked up locally.
Right. But you understand that if you want to continue to provide that type of service, it would be unlikely that the city would be able to help you with below market rent facility for all of that. You may still have to use those types of relationships to deliver further afield. You already anticipate that, or?
This year we have brought in over $900,000 in in-kind and financial donations. What we're asking the city to do is support keeping the lights on, the rent paid, and maybe 1.5 staff. We are a wholly volunteer organization right now, and to provide the amount of time to be open to the public that would be beneficial, we would need at least 1.5 staff so that we could expand our hours.
And to be clear, because this is so education-based, you're also applying to the other orders of government and the other types of foundations in those other orders, like Trillium, et cetera? Or we're just one of the places you're applying?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Seeing whether or not there is any other members wishing to ask questions. I see none. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Yes, the next public speaker is Tony Ray from the Toronto District School Board. Tony, are you connected?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Mr. Ray. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'd actually like to point out that I'm not a representative of the Toronto District School Board, although I do work for the Toronto District School Board. My position is a speech language pathologist in the schools in the Jane Finch community for the past 16 years. I'm more speaking on behalf of the families that I serve in the Jane Finch community. In my role as a speech pathologist, I support students from junior kindergarten up to grade 12 with their communication needs, learning, social, emotional, and behavior needs. Usually the focus of our services is in early intervention, junior kindergarten up to grade 3. But in a community like Jane and Finch, our students and parents often form relationships with us that are long-term relationships of trust. Despite our system's reliance on social workers and other support workers, our parents trust usually the first person that they get involved with. As early interventionists, parents are more likely to share information about their vulnerabilities, including financial and social emotional needs. My relationship with the families as a speech pathologist has provided me insights into the needs within the Jane Finch community. Many of our students lack resources, including access to technology, soft or life skills such as resume writing and interviewing, opportunities for role models and mentoring, and career-focused employment. Some families are struggling to have enough food. Parents are working 2 and 3 jobs, so they're unable to support their students' learning. In April of this year, I discovered that one of my families needed a device for their 6-year-old to engage in virtual learning when schools were closed, and her personal device had stopped working. So I reached out to my community contacts, and one of them directed me to Teresa. After contacting Teresa about my family's needs, I visited the education bank in Scarborough to pick up a laptop and educational resources for this family. I discovered a community hub with learning centers and resources ranging from toddlers and parents all the way up to high school students. The various resources and activity centers also included, there are aisles of self-serve resources for children and parents, allowing the children and parents to have some choice, autonomy, and self-respect in accessing which educational and self-care resources that they required. A learning resource center like the Education Bank could play a critical role in reducing the effects of inequity within communities with lower income, resources, and opportunities, even before the pandemic highlighted these inequities in our communities. I'm finished speaking. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, sir. Madam Claire, would you call the next speaker, please?
Yes, the next speaker is Steve Brown from Nelson Education. Steve, are you connected?
Steve Brown, are you there?
To the chair, that speaker is not connected.
Okay. Will that speaker be connected? Is that speaker here?
No, they are currently not connected to the session.
So they're not here. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's okay. Fantastic. Thank you. So, Madam Clerk, it appears that Mr. Brown is not here. Would you call the next speaker, please?
We have emailed Mr. Brown as well, just to double check if he still intends to speak.
Okay, thank you.
The next person is Jessica Mosher from Parents Engaged in Education and the Education Bank. Jessica, are you connected?
Ms. Mosher? Okay,
Can
thank
you
you.
hear me?
I can hear you. There's a bit of echo, but let's see how we proceed. You have 5 minutes. You may proceed.
Information about their vulnerabilities, including financial and social emotional needs.
This is Nahom with the City Clerk's office. I'm sorry, I had to mute Jessica Mosher for a moment. Jessica, if you are watching this meeting on YouTube, if you could please mute or turn that off as we're getting some looping audio. Jessica, I am now unmuting your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You may proceed. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jessica Mosher. I'm the Executive Vice President and Managing Director at the educational publishing company Nelson, one of Parents Engaged in Education corporate sponsors. And as of November 2020, I'm also a board director at Parents Engaged in Education and the Education Bank. Parents Engaged in Education is a not-for-profit organization founded in 2015, which provides tools and support to parents and guardians to help encourage their child's engagement at school. With the urgent need to support families on a fixed income through COVID-19, Parents Engaged responded with the creation of thousands of learn-at-home kits containing essential resources to ensure students could continue to learn when schools went remote. Through this initiative and with the support of several grants, in February 2021, a new family service center was established in Scarborough, with the centre housing Canada's first ever education bank. The Education Bank is the first of its kind in Canada, providing children and their families the opportunity to choose the books and materials they need is empowering. Research in education shows that student engagement leads to better outcomes. The disparity between children from wealthy families and those with families on a fixed income became even more pronounced with the pandemic. My company, Nelson, works with school boards across Ontario and across the country, and there is serious concern about the growing learning gaps for all students, but particularly for students that could not access online materials and or printed material during the pandemic. And in the fall, even if we are able to be back in school, there will be continued need that students from families on a fixed income can access learning resources both at school and also in their homes. For pre-K children and younger, having a set of their own books, and particularly books they have chosen at home, is essential. If we want them to form the basic literacy skills. The Education Bank is housed in the new Family Service Centre in Scarborough that opened in February 2021. Through several grants and the resourcefulness of our Executive Director, Teresa Pastori, and a lot of hard work by a number of volunteers. The goal of the Education Bank is to serve 4,000 families over the year, and at this point, we're on track to exceed this goal. Through the creativity and resourcefulness of Teresa and the Education Bank volunteers, throughout lockdown, we've been able to serve communities across the GTA by creating a system of selection of resources by families. So the children and the families are still empowered to choose what they need and allow either curbside pickup. And for those not able to get to the Family Service Centre, Teresa has been able to involve neighbourhood police forces to deliver those resources. Once the lockdown is over, the Family Service Centre will be able to augment the outreach we have with the Education Bank by providing a space for students and their families to come in Scarborough. This will fill a need in one of our most diverse neighbourhoods, particularly for teenagers in the area not able to access online tools. Here they will be able to access those tools, as well as access to mentorship programs and other supports. And they'll also have the opportunity to volunteer in order to give back, another empowering aspect of the Education Bank in the Family Service Centre. I've met some of the student volunteers who are already helping put kits together, all following safety protocols. And it's amazing to see these youth giving back and feeling empowered by making the Family Service Centre their space and the Education Bank their way of helping their community. We're currently measuring impact by giving families we're serving a survey about the Education Bank, and will continue once the Family Service Centre is fully opened. We've also recently added an educational specialist to our board who will help us look at other ways to measure the impact on students and young learners. One of the unique aspects of the Education Bank is the fact it's centralizing donations. Many organizations want to give, such as the company that I worked for, Nelson, but with so many numerous requests, it's hard to choose where the largest impact will be. By consolidating donations and supplying these resources to various communities and families across the GTA, the Education Bank is streamlining the process, ensuring more of an impact, similar to First Book Canada or Canada Helps. It's clear the Education Bank is filling a need in Scarborough and across the Greater Toronto area. Our goal is to build a successful model that can be replicated and work with other communities.
You have 30 seconds to complete.
No worries. That can be replicated and work with other communities across the province to open education banks where needed. And that's it for me.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Let me see whether or not there are any questions of you. Questions of you by visiting Councillor Ainsley. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Ms. Mosher, you're the Executive Vice President at Nelson Education?
That's right. And apologies on behalf of our CEO. He had to leave to another meeting.
Not a problem. I think it's great to see, yourself and also Mr. Brown, the CEO of Nelson Education, listed as deputants in support of parents in education. And I understand that you've also joined the board of directors of Parents Engaged in Education?
Yes, this past November I did.
Yeah, I know that Nelson Education is considered one of the premier education publishers in Canada, also Scarborough-based. But what drove you, aside from the support you're giving, to want to get involved in parents and education?
What I saw happening was really extraordinary in the midst of everything going on with COVID. Like a lot of people who feel, that I was on the better side of things, I wanted to give back. What I saw, Teresa, and I met with the other board members and the volunteers, and I started helping with the kits, and then they were opening the Family Service Center, and it was extraordinary to me, her drive and ability to get all of us opening the center, and the immediate impact that had was extraordinary. I've been thankful to be able to be part of, early on we were able to bring the families in. They were able to choose their resources. I've done volunteer board work elsewhere, but it is extraordinary the impact that's happening across the communities and the families that she's helping.
Okay, great. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ms. Mosher. I really appreciate your time this morning and also all of your dedication to my community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainslie. Let me just check to see whether there are any further questions of you, Ms. Mosher. Members, I just have one basic one for you. Are you located on Birchmount?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, our next speaker, please.
Yes, the next speaker is Paul DiProspero from the Toronto Secondary Unit of the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. Paul, are you connected?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. You have 5 minutes, sir. You may proceed.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Paul DiProspero with the Toronto Secondary Unit. We represent about 2,500 teachers in our secondary panel with the Catholic Board in Toronto. And during the course of the pandemic, I have heard from dozens of educators who have voiced their concerns about the number of students they have had difficulty reaching and connecting with, especially during the remote learning portions of our schooling. And this is in large part due to some of the students' limited access to technology, as well as other resources. We have clearly seen the divide created in our education system for students who have access to computers and internet and other supports and those who do not. At the start of the remote learning, many of our teachers even delivered some of their own devices to students who were in need of connectivity in an effort to help them participate in their online classes. We were happy to have connected with the Parents Engaged in Education organization, whose Education Bank initiative has helped hundreds of students in securing equipment and resources that school boards, quite frankly, couldn't provide on their own. We now continuously recommend to our teachers to pass along the Education Bank website and contact information to students and families in need to help students obtain the resources and supports they need. So any support given to this important initiative will go a long way in helping to bring equity across our education system. And thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me just check to see if there is any questions of you, visiting member. Seeing none from Councillor Ainslie, none from members of the committee. Thank you very much for your presentation. Madam Clerk, the last speaker, please.
The next speaker is Michelle Stasis from Centennial College. Michelle, are you connected?
To the chair, that speaker is connected. They'll just need to hit the connect option at the bottom of their panel as they have the audio panels enabled. And it looks like they've done that now. I am unmuting Michelle.
Thank you. Ms. Stasis, are you there? Hello, Michelle, are you there?
To the chair, that speaker is unmuted and should be able to speak now. I will attempt to troubleshoot with that speaker if you'd care to move to the next speaker.
Madam Clerk, do we have another speaker on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that there is an additional speaker on this, Richard Shaw from the Toronto Police Service. Richard, are you connected?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, go ahead. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I can guarantee three things. One, I certainly will not have the time clock called on me. Two, I won't be as eloquent as everyone who has had the opportunity to speak before me. And three, I will not be able to match the enthusiasm and passion of Teresa. And that is why I'm honored and able to speak today. I had the opportunity to meet some members of Parents Engaged in Education. Just as a little bit of history, I work at 42 Division. I am a sergeant in the Neighborhood Community Office. at 42 Division, and we presently service 3 communities. In one of those communities, I had the opportunity to meet Teresa and her team at one of our food banks, where they would show up religiously and put books out so that individuals and youth who were attending those food banks could collect books and have something to read. As they moved along their journey, they moved into a neighborhood office, as indicated down the street from us on Milner, and we have had the opportunity to tour that. And I have to tell you that I could not support an organization more than the opportunity one. We were so impressed. It was sold to us, or at least advised, that this was going to be the first school bank, a school resource bank, and it certainly is. It is impressive in how much they have collected, how much collaboration they've worked together with the community and expanded into other communities. Our involvement with them has been to assist what has, in my opinion, been a great transition during COVID lockdowns in order to facilitate and assist distributing some of the packages that Parents Engaged in Education has been distributing. And I can tell you that Teresa's kept us certainly busy. We thought it was going to be a couple deliveries a couple times a month, but we are delivering weekly. Along that journey as well, she has been introduced to other divisions where she has expanded, and the organization has expanded so that deliveries could be to other communities and other youth of need as well. I cannot articulate in any other way as to say that this is an organization that, to a person in our office, has impressed us greatly. And I think that is an invaluable resource for our communities and for communities throughout the city of Toronto in order to assist in what has been the most troubling time for students, what's been the most troubling time for youth, and able to get them re-engaged and able to get them resources so that they can navigate these troubled times. It's been an honor to be a partner with them, and we look forward to continued collaboration with this team. And as I say, I'm not the most articulate person, but I hope you can hear the passion in my voice and the support for this organization. I can tell you just very quickly that we are participating in a number of food banks and a number of different events, and all of the resources are becoming challenging for everybody during this time. And I don't think that this program is unique in that area. And anything that I could do to offer support or advise support for this organization, I certainly would do. I promised I would stay under the time, and I did that. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of this organization today. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw. And I think your articulation has just been absolutely fantastic, and your energy has been very inspirational. So I don't think you should sell yourself short. You are fantastic. Thank you. Let me see what any questions for you. We have questions for you, sir, from Councillor Ainslie. Councillor Ainslie, you may begin, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Sergeant Shaw, thank you very much for coming in this morning, or sorry, debuting this morning. So it sounds from your experience that Parents Engaged in Education has become a real resource for probably not only 42 Division, but 43 and 41 Division as well.
100%. That was the first introduction that was made. Quite frankly, Teresa was keeping us too busy. So I contacted her, or at least connected her with 43 and 41 divisions, so that they could help service the communities in their division. The other thing with this sort of collaboration, which has been great, is people are surprised that we're delivering. You know, we show up, we're in uniform, we're delivering, and it gives us a chance as well in these times where people aren't out and about as much, certainly as they would be normally. It gives us a chance to really meet people in the neighborhood, gives us a chance to sort of introduce ourselves as neighborhood officers. And I know that 43 and 41 Division and other divisions throughout the city are doing the exact same.
And I would think, Sergeant, that one of the other benefits for you as a police officer and Toronto Police Services, having children reading, having access to computers so they can get their homework done. A number of the other resources that parents engaged in education and the bank provide would be a great benefit to youth, giving them something other more beneficial and positive to be doing, and freeing up your time, I would think.
Invaluable. And I think it's invaluable on a number of reasons. Yes, to give them renewed energy, to give them renewed support for something that has been the most challenging this year during COVID for youth in their scholastic endeavors, obviously. And I don't think that we're unique in expressing that. But having, a delivery of fresh supplies, a delivery, I know for us in our office, we've supplied computers to individuals because that's also been problematic, is the technology shortage for some schools, and in order to be able to bridge that gap, invaluable not only to the students but also hopefully keeping them engaged so that they are engaged in positive endeavors as opposed to negative ones.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sergeant. I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. Let me just see whether there are any members of committee wishing to ask Sergeant Shaw questions. Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir. All right.
Thank you very much.
You are. Madam Clerk, the next speaker, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So the next speaker is Michelle Stasis from Centennial College, and I believe that Michelle is now connected. Michelle, can you please confirm?
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. You have 5 minutes. You may begin, ma'am.
Great. Thank you so much. Just to be clear, I'm not representing Centennial College today, although it is where I work. And I wanted to start with thanking you all for your time and consideration. So my name is Michelle Stace, and I am a Parents Engaged in Education board member. I am a new member, and I joined this past November of 2020. I'm currently employed with Centennial College as our high school coordinator. I work with our youth and families in the Scarborough community, and it is through my role that I see firsthand the need in our community. I know at Centennial College, more students fund their education through OSAP loans than any other college in Ontario, and that is due to the above average need in the community we service, which is the same community as Parents Engaged in Education. Despite efforts to promote equal access to education, the experiences and outcomes of students differ greatly depending on their family incomes. The work that Parents Engaged in Education is doing in our community with the First Education Bank and the Family Service Center really speaks to the needs of this community. I met Teresa Pastor, our executive director, almost 2 years ago through a colleague at Centennial College, as he was providing space for parents engaged in education to have their meetings. And when I heard what they were doing to raise children up by providing free resources and skill-building opportunities to families on fixed incomes, I wanted to know more. As I have worked on research studies on barriers to education, I have also worked with the Red Cross, I have worked with Poor Child Canada, I have worked with the Terry Fox Foundation, and I know the non-for-profit space. And Teresa Pastor is one of the most dedicated ladies I have ever met. I loved her passion and her ideas, and have since supported the organization and the endeavors, and that is what brings me here today. The team and the volunteers that surround this organization is also filled with sincere and invested community members. The days I've spent at the Education Bank and Family Service Center, I've spoken to families in need, and their stories are heartbreaking. For example, a two-parent family who worked and earned fair income prior to the pandemic are now both unemployed, and they can't keep up with their rent or bills since the pandemic. Or the family that only has one parent working a minimum wage job, but they have 5 children and just don't know what to do. There are many people in this situation. With so many people out of work, many families are struggling to provide their essentials. When kids visit or receive a delivery care package from the Education Bank and Family Service Center, they receive a lunch bag, which is filled, an educational toy, and lots of school supplies. We even have toiletries to help families who are in need, because the truth of it is, when you can hardly afford to feed your family, things like shampoo and deodorant, especially for the kids and teenagers of the family, become a luxury. I won't continue on with any more stories of how badly this pandemic has affected our lives, as I'm sure you hear about that all the time. But what Parents Engaged in Education is doing is providing space and facilitating services for those that are in need, with a focus on families and children and their education. We know there was an education gap due to inequalities around socioeconomic issues before the pandemic. The need has now increased dramatically due to the pandemic, with more families falling into the socioeconomic categories where their children will face undue burdens and inequalities with their education and available opportunities. What makes this worse is that low-income students are often restricted by school choice and the possible pathways their school offers. And with regards to school rankings, lower-income neighborhoods consistently obtain lower achievement levels. We also know that students from lower-income communities are 3 times more likely to drop out of high school. Those numbers were reported in October 2019, before the pandemic, proving the need to support these youth. Now, in addition to the pandemic, the need is even greater. This was reported in the Vital Signs report put out by the Toronto Foundation. The work Parents Engaged in Education is doing is so very important in closing these gaps. By facilitating the opportunities for children to use and learn state-of-the-art equipment, and lending libraries and activities that would otherwise be out of reach, and with the programming and services to help support students and their families, we hope to provide opportunities to meet their immediate needs, but to also support these children down paths to continued opportunities through academic support. The resources, skill building, and community building Parents Engaged in Education is facilitating is essential in our communities, and we need to keep the doors open so we can continue to service our communities.
30 seconds.
Parents Engaged in Education is truly needed across the whole city, and today, if you vote to help us, we can make a difference in these communities in need. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of the Parents Engaged in Education and the First Education Bank.
Thank you very much. Let me check to see if there are any questions of you. Everything number, Councillor Ainsley, you see none. Take it into committee. Committee members, seeing none. Thank you very much. All right, so members and non-members, I guess this is an opportunity to maybe ask questions of staff. All right, so, and I just want to remind everyone, we have a stop coming up around 12:15 or so we are pressed for time. So Councillor Ainsley, questions of staff.
I'm okay. I've been working with parents in education for quite a while, and we've have identified
fair enough, Councillor.
So
no questions.
I'm good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just seeing whether or not any members of committee question of staff. All right. Let me just ask one quick question of staff. Through to, I guess it's the social development and finance. Just you've heard the presentation and you're aware of this matter, and I know that you have had discussions with Councillor Ainsley and so on. I'd put it to you that we have many organizations that are doing great work, just like this organization. They're looking for resources and so on. Is it possible for us today to make a decision to support this organization, whether or not it's financially and or providing space?
Through the chair, I would say that we have to follow the process, that there is a process in place for both our community space tenancy program as well as our community funding program. So
okay.
We would have to follow the process.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions. All right, to speak. Councillor Ainsley, do you wish to speak? Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. I'm asking, so this item came from a notice of motion that I put forward at City Council. And I'm basically asking for 2 things. I'm asking for the city to work with parents engaged in education to find some city space. When I first became aware of parents engaged in education, they were actually in the gymnasium at Kinks Road and Galloway Road in the center of my ward, in the center of a neighborhood improvement area. They only had that space due to COVID. It was unused. And had to move out of it as TCHC started looking at resurrecting their recreation programs for the neighborhood that are also very well used. Immediately adjacent to 4301 Kingston Road is Sir Robert L. Borden, former secondary school and job and technical school that the public school board used to run that we're just in the midst of final negotiations with, which I think would be an excellent home for parents engaged in education. But once again, as Ms. Grant said, they do have to go through the below market rent agreement process, which I fully support. They recognize I'm not looking for any shortcuts here. And then the second part is you've all heard the tremendous work that Parents Engaged in Education is doing in the community. The partnerships that they've created, having the executive vice president of Nelson Education, which is one of the premier educational publishing companies in Canada, happily located in Scarborough, but having their executive vice president join the board of directors of Parents in Education because they recognize the tremendous work that's being done in the eastern area of Scarborough. So the second part of the motion is really asking for our staff to help parents engaged in education advocate with the provincial government, the Ministry of Education, because there's definitely hurdles there that they're having trouble overcoming. I've reached out to almost every MPP in Scarborough trying to get them assistance there, and there's hurdles that just need to be overcome that I think some professional help from our very excellent city staff would go a long way in assisting. And first and foremost, I always say I'm never shy about getting resources into my ward that will help my residents. I have 5 neighborhood improvement areas in my ward. The EQOA testing in the grade schools in my ward in the Kings Road, Galloway, Orton Park are among some of the lowest in the city. The youth unemployment rate in the Kings Road, Galloway, Orton Park area is amongst the highest in the GTA. So when we can have a resource like Parents Engaged in Education that can help families to educate their children, help parents engage their children so they get a love of reading, which supplements their education, I think that's of paramount importance. I know as a municipal government, we're not supposed to spend a lot of time in the educational sphere, but this is a resource that's badly needed in Eastern Scarborough. I know Ms. Pastore said that she has goals of expanding across the city, but at this point, first and foremost, my goal is to make sure that this organization is well established in Eastern Scarborough and has the resources from our municipal government that can help them succeed. And if that's resources that we can bring to the table that will help the provincial government, stimulate them or encourage them to bring financial support or partnerships to the table as well, I'm all for that. So I'm asking the committee to support the motion that's before them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. All right. Any other speakers? I'm just looking at my list. Councillor Carroll, I think you wanted to speak on this item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Carroll.
I had a large hand in referring this to the committee, and so people are probably, suspicious of my modus operandi here. And I'll admit to a bit of a knee-jerk, hey, there's a process to this, and I've taken agencies through the below-market rent process, and you got to be fair, because in every ward there are people who need it, and that was fundamentally what guided that decision. But having listened to the deputations, I am now more convinced than I was sitting in council. First of all, that this is at the right committee. It's not ready for real estate committee yet. There is a program issue here and a who does what issue across all levels of government that I think really needs the attention of our staff that we've heard from already today during questions. And I'll tell you why. If I can just briefly go back in time. Let's wind this clock all the way back to 1981, when there was no such thing as a food bank. Often in a crisis in society, and there was a sort of rapid recession crisis then, and suddenly we had this little food bank called the Daily Bread Food Bank, and before we knew it, we were in the food business, and happily so, we're the logical partner there, and we help nutrition programs every year, but we expected that to be temporary. It's not. Well, I think there's something similar going on here. This is a small little volunteer action that is growing rapidly out of a crisis. But I'll tell you this, it's not temporary. God love you for the work you're doing, but what you are doing is filling a gap that has existed in the education system for 20 years now. And you all know it. I know you know it. That's how you started this organization. The kinds of supports that make every child ready to learn, no matter what the circumstances at home, are not being provided in the education system. They should be, and they are not. And that's why your people so dedicated in that field, helping, sitting on the board, doing whatever they can to help this organization create the first ever education bank. It's a bank that's starting out to fill a temporary need and could go on forever, just like food banks. And so I really want social development, finance, and admin to work with them first to understand what is the business plan here, where is this going, and who should be your number one supporter. Is it one big warehouse you need? Is it satellites you need? Who should be providing those? What should our role be? All of that really needs to be done, I think, before we actually step up and be a government walking into the provincial government with them to say, let's get some financial support for these guys. Why is the school board not? Why are they not before the school board demanding that the school board go in asking for this support? Or more to the point, why isn't the school board asking for enough funds to do this themselves? All those questions need to be sort of looked at. Maybe us asking is the leverage they need, but I really would love to hear back from SDF&A what our role should be in the dawn of the education bank and where the education bank may end up going in the end. I think that Ms. Grant, Ms. Campbell, really need to tell us. I understand the chair has a motion to that effect. I think they really need to tell us after they've sat down with these people what they think they can do, and then we as council can adopt it, knowing that we've set some parameters for the future. Yeah, thank you. Those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Are there any other additional speakers on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will actually speak. I have a motion, and I think Councillor Carroll has actually spoken quite eloquently towards the motion that I have. I want to thank all the speakers and Councillor Ainsley for bringing this particular matter forward. There is a need for us to look at how we can support organizations like this, the Education Bank, and there are many others out there as well. We need to ensure that our policies are in place to take a look in terms of what we will do with respect to space tenancy, and we have a policy associated with that. We also need to look at how we could help to create this advocacy for organizations like these and many others who exist, who have actually grown as a result of the pandemic. I mean, it has thrown a variety of different complexities at us and towards us, and we have had amazing leaders, residents who have stepped up to fill a void that Councillor Carroll, in this case, in the education system, that has existed for a very, very long period of time. So the motions are there, and I'll ask members to support the motions. And so all those in favor of the motions that are there, and again, thank Councillor Ainsley for bringing this matter forward. All those in favor? Oppose? That's carried. Okay, that item has been dealt with. Madam Clerk, just going to keep moving on. We're moving now to the next item, which is EC 22.8, 5 and 2, kitchen food security for Scarborough Southeast. We have a speaker. Would you ask the speaker to come forward, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So the speaker on this item is Seema David from 5 and 2 Soup Kitchen Project. Seema, are you connected?
Yes, I am.
Good morning, Ms. David. You may begin. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Mayor, and panelists and councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of 5 and 2. We started as a soup kitchen way back in 2013. I was a fairly new immigrant to Canada and had faced pretty much many hardships settling into this country, this beautiful country, I must say. And when we started 5 and 2 way back in 2013, we started with serving at 3 locations in Scarborough and operating out of a church kitchen. And for 7 years, we've served the communities in Scarborough with food. Our mandate and vision was to provide free meals simply to provide the free meals to anyone who needed it in our communities. And we did this for about 7 years with no funding. We worked largely 90% with volunteers. But since the pandemic came on, for the first time in 2020, we did receive funding from the city, which we're very grateful for, because having had no funds to pay anyone but a chef for 7 years, we now have 4 staff, and we've expanded our programs. So we've actually rebranded from 5 and 2 kitchens to 5 and 2, and our free meal programs, though it is our foundation and base, we've added a 5 and 2 garden project. All this came out of the pandemic last year, the needs that the pandemic brought up. We've added a free food pantry on site where clients come in and get to select their groceries, mitigating standing in lines, because we know we've served meals at food banks for the past 7-8 years, and people stand in lines for half a day to get 2 bags of groceries. So we wanted to move away from that food bank model. And so we share a link with many partnership agencies where clients can be registered and come in for a 15-minute appointment and pick up their groceries. So we've moved beyond just the free meals. We've added an edu program where we're attempting to teach seniors how to navigate technology in these challenging times, and also a Meals to You. So a lot of people who are isolated at home are now getting groceries and meals delivered free of cost to their homes, just to mitigate, again, risk, so they don't have to come out if they're at high risk. And so because we get calls all the time from people from all around the province saying, I have an aunt, or I have a mother or someone living in Scarborough in your community, can you get food to her because she's at risk? So we've been doing this work. My concern now is we have funding we've received from the city, the TO supports, we've got OTF money for this year, but all of this money is emergency money. It's 3 months, it's 4 months. What happens by the end, say fall of 2021, when this money runs out? I have to send the staff home. How do I manage those programs which are now in place, the 4 new programs beside the free meals? So I'm not bringing anyone on to speak today because I'm respecting your time. It's noon. We're already at noon now. And I just want to speak for 5 and 2 because we've done this. This is our 8th year. We're completing 8 years. We're going into our 9th year. We do fundraise. We have run on small donations. We are fundraising all the time. And we want to move to being a social enterprise where we can supply subsidized meals, bring some funding in and support ourselves. But to reach that point, it's going to take a couple more years. I'm hoping not more than 2-3 years. In the interim, I'm asking the city to help us because we also have a space issue. We've been given a lease notice. We pay rent. We rent from Algate properties at Markham and Ellesmere at that corner. This is our 3rd year over there. And they've asked us to vacate our location by the end of this year. So we are facing a challenge with space. So we are looking for alternate space to move out by the end of the year. But what happens to the people now? We're serving around 3,500 meals and grocery supports every week to people in the city. And so we want to continue this good work. We have 40 to 50 volunteers on our rolls who come in through the week. And so I just need help from the city for this time till we are able to stabilize further. We've not come up during pandemic. We've been here since 2013, and we work with about 12 partnerships. When I say partnerships, we supply them. They don't give us any money. They supply the meals. For example, 4 or 5 Toronto community housing communities we support. Like
30 seconds.
Yes, so there's so many. There's Warden Woods, there's Storefront, there's Salvation Army, there's Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities. So we have large partnerships, and they're large. They have a lot of funding, but we supply the meals to them, right? So I just want to respect your time and say, consider us for some supports because we need to continue doing what we're doing in the city. Because
thank you very much.
Hunger is hidden in this part of the city, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Let's see whether or not there's a visiting Councillor Ainsley, the question first. We'll come to the committee in a moment, Councillor Carroll. Go ahead, Councillor Ainsley.
Yep, I'll be very quick. I know time is ticking. Seema, just to be clear, so in the 2 years or 2.5 years since we first met, this is the 2nd location that you've been in. You've expanded the 2nd location, but now you need larger space, correct?
Yes.
And you're serving, how many meals a week are you? If we just looked at meals, it was 20. You're now serving 2,500 meals a week.
It's 3,500, Councillor Ainsley.
Okay, and that's all out of your current location, or?
Yes. The meals go out from 2050 Ellesmere, but they're served out of 12 other locations in Scarborough.
Yeah, and that includes, and you've also, I know you've helped with cooking courses at the East Scarborough storefront, for example. So you're doing a lot of work in the community, not just cooking meals, correct?
Yes.
And what you would like from us today really is really city support. You've had some financial support from the city, but really what you're looking for us today is assistance in a necessary space. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, all right. Deputy Mayor Thompson, those are my questions. Thank you, Seema. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Yes, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Councillor Ainsley. Councillor Carroll to question.
So it's great to hear about some of the organizations that you're providing food through. This is great work. Have you, prior to this motion being passed, what work have you done with food security staff and food security grant programs within the city so far to understand where you would go next in the city's process?
Councillor Carroll, we are in conversation with the city. I've actually had a conversation with Vera last year with several different groups. We've been reaching out and again telling the story as this is what we need, and they're now directing us to different groups to say this, or different conversations to say this is what you need to do. But just to go back from since 2013, every time we reached out to the city or to anyone at all, they said city doesn't fund food because we believe we are giving enough social assistance to people to newcomers and to others. Right. So, but then when we look at research and we actually meet people on the ground every day, we realize that money, once people have paid their basic rent and other basic necessities, they don't have more than $200 left in a month for food. So that's
right. I'm aware of the actual food security issue. I have a very hungry neighborhood, but in my ward as well, and a food bank. But while we don't fund the food directly, I imagine what they were talking about was the food part is the partnership, not just with people that you provide food for, but the food partnership would be with food organizations who do, in fact, procure and provide food. So are there some steps to take there? Is that why the city hasn't gone further in their support thus far?
We actually, I guess it's on my end, we haven't really been able to make any headway with the city for 7 years. We work largely with food rescue. I think that's one of the major reasons how we've survived for 8 years now, because 80% of our supplies are rescued food. Right. We work with, of course, Second Harvest Food Rescue with a lot of local stores. So we get a lot of soon to expire food, and that's how we've actually managed to survive all these years.
Okay, now I'm getting the picture. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. There are no further questions of you, ma'am. Thank you. Is there any questions of staff from members? Councillor Ainsley, again, I just want to remind folks that we are really pressing for time. Go ahead.
Yep,
please.
One quick question,
Sure.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, to staff. Just if 5 and 2 kitchens disappeared today and they served 3,500 meals, how would the community fill that gap?
So what I would say is that we can't answer that question directly. I don't have that number, but what I can say is that we should look around at the community and see what other agencies might be supporting that area, and provide that information to the wards.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. Any members of committee wishing to question on this? All right, seeing none. All right, to speak, Councillor Ainsley, go ahead, please. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor Thompson. To speak very quickly, this is another organization in my ward, very similar to our last item. I knew of 5 and 2 kitchens prior to the last election when my ward expanded and it went westward and I took in 5 and 2 kitchens area. They were in the basement of a church on Markham Road. They outlived that space. They moved to their current area in the midst of an industrial plaza. They've expanded that area. I'm here today with this motion to try and formalize the process for 5 and 2 kitchen. About 1.5 years ago, I had Chris Brillinger meet with Seema. She got a tour of 5 and 2 kitchens. Hoping that would help move it forward. But, unfortunately, Mr. Brillinger, I think for all of us, has moved on to a job in the not-profit sector. But I always worry that, as I said for my question, that if 5 and 2 kitchens just disappeared, that if they didn't have adequate space in Eastern Scarborough, in my ward that has 5 neighborhood improvement areas, that they serve 3,500 meals a day. They provide cooking courses. They actually provide people with the food, and then they get a course on how to prepare that food. So they're sustainable. Seema didn't tell you the actual name 5 and 2 is derived from the story in the Bible where Christ feeds thousands of people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And that's what Seema does each and every week. She takes the food that's provided to her and extrapolates it and creates miracles and feeds people in Eastern Scarborough. And I'm very concerned that if 5 and 2 kitchen doesn't have adequate space, that it's going to be a huge hole in Scarborough. It's a resource that's definitely needed in our neighborhood improvement areas. And I'm not seeing other organizations that would come forward to fill that gap. So I'm really here to formalize a process to make sure we have city staff at the table that can report back and help overcome some of the hurdles that Ms. David has in dealing with other levels of government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ainsley. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Carroll, go ahead, please.
I'm glad that in his last sentence, Councillor Ainsley talked about reporting back, because I think that's what's needed here. We need to hear back from staff why we haven't had this happen already. I know it's difficult. The same thing happened when we were working to set up the Oriole Food Hub in the Peanut. Similarly, a food bank that just hands out canned goods doesn't build the capacity in any family. And understand, the food that you can get. What do you do with a little bag of quinoa? It's a miracle food that does a lot for a family. So it's the cooking the cooking and preparation and teaching that turns something into a real family capacity builder. So this is great work, but I really do need the report back. The challenge for us is that it just doesn't say report back in the original motion. So I really appreciate the chair ensuring that will happen. We got to set things up for success. And I worry when I see a motion that just says help them find space and give them financial support, that we enter into something where there's a built-in expectation at the beginning that is quite different from what our BMR program actually is. The people who have below market rent leases actually have they're taking on a substantial commitment, because below market rent doesn't mean free. And it doesn't mean we pay for everything. So it means that staff have to really look at, are you going to be able to keep the lights on? Yes, we've got some space here and some commitment to the capital infrastructure of it and the maintenance of it. But day to day, are you going to be able to keep up with what is a below market rent lease, not a free space? And so that work, we need that work to be done within the process, along with the other organizations. It's not that the city doesn't understand hunger. Every year, we take whatever dollars are left over at the end of the budget process and try and put as much as we can into food security. No question about it. But making sure that we set up an organization not only to be able to continue to serve, but to be viable in that lease space is really key. And so I think getting the report back, which isn't quite in the motion, what the chair doing that will ensure that we're really setting them up for success. And I really hope they do find long-term success. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Anyone else to speak? Okay, seeing none. I do have a motion, and it really asks that staff look to work with this group. I want to thank Ms. David and members. The motion's actually on the screen. Just in the interest of time, I'll thank Ms. David, and just to simply say that this is an opportunity for staff to engage in, as Councillor Ainsley is hoping, to engage in that process where they can look to see how they can help the 5 and 2 kitchen to come up with this particular space. It does require them to report back, and obviously I don't have a time on there, but they know that there's an urgency in the communication that we had from Councillor Ainsley. It did speak to a time that this a move has to take place for 5 and 2 kitchens, and Ms. David also spoke to it, that she's been given notice by her tenant, or sorry, her landlord, to vacate and so on. So the tenant is there. So this is an opportunity for that to take place. So that's the motion that's there. Sorry, Councillor Carroll, you had a question? Yeah.
Chair, I don't actually see the words "and report back to us," and here's why I think it would be wonderful to do this, because this isn't the first time this happens.
Sorry, I'm almost done.
I think that
Paul,
that pardon?
Yeah, good. You're off now. Go ahead, Councillor.
I just think there would be real value, you know, after doing the work with 5 and 2. We hope that they get through the process, but I think it would be good to report back to us what was needed, what sets up the best cocktail for success, so that in future motions that local councillors may be bringing forward in these hard times, that we'll save some steps and follow the right path. I think the report back would be a learning experience.
I totally agree, Councillor Carroll. And so what I'd like to suggest that the clerk just amend the motion to report back. Are you good with September, October? I think September would be great, to report back to the committee in September.
We do September just because the landlord has a deadline of November to.
It is September. Yeah, it's just September. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam, you're welcome. So, Madam Clerk, if we could just adjust that, please, to reflect that we're requesting the report to be brought back in September. All right. I know that the clerk's working on that, so just give her a moment. Members, we have 2 items left. So why don't we just do this, members? Can we just step this one down for a moment and then go to the next, and we'll come back in order to give the clerk some time. Councillor Ainsley, we will get this reporting back to September. I know you may have to go. Okay.
I'm just seeing the motion on the screen.
Here we go. There we go. It's here now. So thank you. Members, the motion's actually on the screen with the requested amendment by Councillor Carroll, which is the reporting back in September. All right. All those in favor? I can't see anybody on the screen at the moment. There we go. Opposed? Councillor Ainsley, well, you're not allowed to vote. You're in support. I agree. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we're moving ahead now to the next item, which is EC 22.9, evidence-based safe reopening plan for live music venue. I had held this item to ask staff a question. I see visiting Councillor Bradford, who's here with us. Councillor Bradford, do you have questions? I just want to let you know that we really need to move on this one because we have a time crunch for all of us.
Got it.
Ahead,
I'll be quick. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions to probably the acting GM of Economic Development. Do we have capacity limits or percentages for venues with respect to live music that have come forward in the most recent plan from the province?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bradford, for your question. I'm aware that we have capacity limits for spaces in music venues, yes.
Do we know if any direct consultation has happened with between the province, the city, and live music venues here in Toronto?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Bradford, for your question. In terms of direct consultation with the province, the city, and music venues, I am definitely aware that there's conversations happening at all levels of order of government. There are, of course, specific conversations that are coming out of economic development and culture with music venues. And of course, we will be able to facilitate any further conversations that are required with the province.
With respect to the capacity limits, what are the key differentiators, the capacity limits proposed for live music venues versus other types of venues, bars, clubs? How is it different?
Through the chair, Councillor Bradford, the capacity limits are insufficiently detailed at this time. So we're aware that there are numbers, but we're looking for more detail. And so across the venues itself, there are different sets of information across the venues. Some of that information doesn't seem to really work for everyone. So we're trying to figure out some standards that are more general for applicability.
Okay, just wrapping up here. I know that the film industry has had a lot of success continuing to safely operate and produce great content during the pandemic here. Have those safe operating procedures been possible for live music and music venues to pursue?
Through the chair, at this particular time, my understanding is that the hard caps exist on the venues, and the venues have been very limited in terms of their ability to pursue any kind of operating during this period of time.
We had asked that we had sent a request to the province to allow live streaming to return to venues. I know that request has come through a number of different channels, not just the City of Toronto and elsewhere, but to your knowledge, have you heard anything back on that request or regarding live music streaming at venues?
Through the chair, Councillor Bradford, live streaming is not allowed in venues until step 2 in the new framework.
Okay, so would this request of the province some additional clarity and information on the things proposed in the letter be helpful?
Through the chair, I think that at this particular time we are certainly very open to continued conversations with the province. I think that the province has been doing a remarkable job in supporting all of us during this COVID response, and we expect that any additional conversations would be supportive to the music industry and music venues.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradford. So Councillor Bradford has asked a lot of the questions that I had wanted to ask. I just wanted to ask the following of Ms. Blackman. So based on the request that's actually here, what is the staff's position? Are we prepared now to ask the province the question in terms of supporting this this recommendation that's contained here in the request from the Toronto Music Advisory Committee?
Through the chair, Deputy Mayor Thompson, consultation with the stakeholders is definitely needed, and we support this idea of continued consultation.
So then would this matter be referred to you then to allow for that consultation to take place? And does that doesn't negate the need or the conversation that's taking place with the province? Because I understood from your response to Councillor Bradford's question that there's ongoing discussion. Is that correct? Recognizing the need to help venues.
Yes, through the chair, thank you for your question. The consultation is ongoing, and we certainly do believe that, if the item is referred to us, we'll be able to move that item forward through consultation, working with Councillor Bradford and the music community writ large in terms of articulating what the supports are that are needed.
So there is not a requirement for a time to be stated here, for example, to adjust this at all because it's ongoing?
Through the chair, we really feel that there's an opportunity for us to have ongoing conversations. So yes, ongoing conversations is something that we're having, and we are really trying to be responsive to the business realities and those hardships that venues are experiencing today.
So the appropriate recommendation is to refer that to you and your staff in order to address this issue.
Through the chair, we would welcome the opportunity to address the issue through our staff and to support the community and the music venues writ large.
Thank you very much. All right. Any further questions of members of committee? Seeing none. Okay, to speak, Councillor Bradford, visiting councillor. Go ahead, please. Did you wish to speak? No. Okay. Members of committee. Oh, Councillor Cressy, did you have a question or did you wish to speak? I didn't see you either.
Oh, no, just 15 seconds of comments.
Sure. Go ahead, please.
I just to say that I support what has been brought forward here, and with big thanks to the new chair of TMAC, Councillor Bradford, and the former chair and our nighttime ambassador, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Clearly, we can, in our recovery from COVID, recover as a music city, and I think the sooner we can do that in a safe way, the better. And I think what's in front of us here will allow us and help the city to communicate that clearly and work closely with the province. So just to say, I think this is a good and important step. So thank you both for bringing it forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressy. And just to speak, I have a motion of referral. The staff has indicated that the matter should be referred back to them. And they've indicated to us that there's ongoing dialogue on this issue. It's very important to venue operators across the city. Councillor Bradford, who chairs TMAC, is aware of the importance because of the conversations that he's had with members and so on. And it's an ongoing conversation, and the city does take a position, in fact, that we do want to have this evidence-based information coming forward in collaboration with the work that our staff is doing. And of course, the medical officer of health and obviously the chair of the Board of Health as well, in terms of their support and concurrence on venues being able to operate in a safe manner and so on. So with that, members, I'd move this item. So the referred item is there. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. We are now moving to our last item, which is the item that was added to the agenda as new business from Councillor Carroll. Members, the item was there for you to review. And I don't know whether or not there is any questions. Anyone has any questions? I'm just looking at the screen from members. I've seen none. Councillor Carroll, did you wish to speak to this item?
Yes, I hope people have had a chance to read it, because this is just a report request. I'm asking for a report back on a review of this neighborhood. A similar request was made from downtown and Councillor Wong Tam's ward. And so, you know, that spoke to me of timing, because both communities, the one that I'm moving today and the one that Councillor Wong Tam moved, were left out of the very first round ever when we started the priority neighborhood program a little over a decade ago now, I think, isn't it, Chair Thompson? Anyway, they were left out of the mix at that time, and they said, we'll catch you in the next round. Then in the next round, they didn't get caught because they pulled in from other areas. So I'm just asking that, along with the neighborhood downtown, that this one be reviewed and report back. I'll be interested to hear, in light of there have been a couple of economic crises since then, whether or not it meets the criteria. If it does, this is also still a growth neighborhood, so I don't think it necessarily needs to become a drain on financial resources of the neighborhood improvement area program, but it may need some help in terms of animation and organizational support. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Carroll. Okay, on the item, Councillor Carroll, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Members, we have one piece of business that we have to do. I'm going to ask for us to reopen EC 22.7 with the parents engaged in education. And I'm going to put a date on that if we could. So that item is being reopened there. And I've asked the clerk to look at that. And it's similar to the one we had with Ms. David and Councillor Carroll, you moving that this item be report back. So I'm going to ask for this to be reported back in September as well. So all those in favor of reopening? Approve. All those in favor of the amendment to the motion? Okay. Items as amended. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Members, we have concluded the business of the day. Let me just confer with the clerk to get her concurrence. Madam Clerk, we have concluded the business of the day.
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn from Deputy Vice Chair Grimes. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Members, thank you very much. Have a great afternoon and see you at council. Bye-bye.